The moment Lena Hart stepped into that conference room, she knew one of two things would happen. Either she'd reclaim everything Victor Shaw had stolen from her, or she'd lose herself completely trying. But standing beside her was the last person she'd expected, a billionaire who'd chosen truth over $1 billion deal, a widowed father who'd risked everything because a waitress spoke sign language to his mother. This isn't a fairy tale. It's messier than that. It's about a woman who disappeared, a man who refused to look away, and the explosive moment when lies finally met their reckoning. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down hard that Tuesday night, turning Manhattan's streets into rivers of neon and brake lights. Lena Hart stood outside Aurelio, one of those restaurants where a single meal cost more than her monthly rent, and tried to remember how to breathe like a normal person. Her hands shook as she smoothed down her black uniform, the same one she'd worn for 3 years, the fabric worn thin at the elbows where she leaned against counters during double shifts. She was late. Again. "You're cutting it close, Hart." Marcus, the floor manager, barely looked up from his clipboard when she slipped through the staff entrance. Water dripped from her coat onto the polished floor. "Table 7's been asking for someone who actually smiles. Think you can manage that?" Lena nodded, shoved her coat into her locker, and tied her hair back with practiced efficiency. In the mirror, a tired 30-year-old woman stared back, dark circles under brown eyes, lips pressed into a line that had forgotten how to curve naturally upward. She used to look different. Used to be different. The dining room hit her like it always did. Warm light, quiet conversation, the subtle clink of crystal and silver. Old money and new fortune sat elbow to elbow, discussing mergers over Wagyu and wine that cost 4 figures a bottle. Lena moved through it like a ghost, refilling water glasses, reciting specials in a voice she'd trained to stay pleasantly neutral. She'd learned not to make eye contact. Not really. People didn't see waitresses anyway. They saw uniforms, functions, the invisible hands that made their evenings run smoothly. It was safer that way. "Excuse me." The voice cut through her carefully constructed invisibility. Lena turned to find a woman in her late 60s, elegant in a charcoal dress, hands moving in quick, frustrated gestures. The man beside her, younger, probably in his 30s, expensive suit, the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers, was trying to get the sommelier's attention and failing. The woman's hands moved again. Sharp, clear, unmistakable. American Sign Language. Lena's heart did something complicated in her chest. She'd spent 3 years making herself smaller, quieter, less noticeable. Speaking ASL in the middle of Aurelio's dining room was the opposite of invisible. But the woman's face held such raw frustration, such dignified anger at being ignored, that Lena's hands moved before her brain could stop them. "Can I help you?" The woman's expression transformed. Relief flooded her features, followed immediately by surprise, then something that looked dangerously close to tears. "Finally, someone who sees me." The woman's signs were elegant, educated. "I've been trying to tell them I'm allergic to shellfish. The menu says the risotto is vegetable, but I need to be certain." "Let me check with the chef directly," Lena signed back. "I'll make absolutely sure." The man in the expensive suit had gone very still. Lena could feel his eyes on her, actually on her in a way that made her skin prickle with warning. She kept her focus on his mother. Had to be his mother. They had the same sharp cheekbones, the same intense way of looking at the world. When she returned 5 minutes later with confirmation and a modified menu, the woman reached out and squeezed her hand. "Thank you. You have no idea what it means to be heard." Lena's throat tightened. "You're welcome," she said. "Come," she said aloud, her voice rough with emotions she couldn't afford to feel. "Where did you learn to sign?" The man's question caught her off guard. Up close, he was younger than she'd thought. Early 30s, maybe. Dark hair, gray eyes that tracked everything. A jaw that looked like it had been carved specifically to intimidate corporate rivals. Power sat on him like a second skin. "College," Lena said, which was true, but not the whole truth. She'd learned ASL because her research partner at Columbia had a deaf sister, because understanding another language meant understanding how people communicated across barriers, how technology could bridge gaps that seemed impossible. That research felt like another lifetime now. "You're not just a waitress." It wasn't a question. Lena's pulse spiked. This was dangerous territory. I'm exactly a waitress, she said carefully. Your appetizers will be out in 7 minutes. Can I get you anything else? She walked away before he could answer, her hands trembling against her sides. Ethan Calloway watched her go, his mind already cataloging details the way it did when something didn't fit the expected pattern. The waitress, Lena, according to her name tag, moved like someone who'd trained herself to take up less space. But her signing had been fluid, confident, the kind that came from real fluency, not a semester-long class. And the way she'd looked at his mother really looked at her with empathy that seemed to hurt. She's remarkable, his mother signed when she had his attention again. She's hiding something, Ethan signed back. His mother's smile was knowing. Everyone is hiding something, darling. The question is whether it's worth finding. Diane Calloway had been deaf since birth, had built a successful career as an architect in a field that tried to ignore her, and had raised Ethan to notice things other people missed. She was rarely wrong about people. The risotto really is excellent, she signed after the first bite. But I'm more interested in why you're still watching our waitress instead of eating. Ethan forced himself to look down at his plate. I'm not watching her. Liar. He was watching her. Couldn't seem to stop. Lena moved through the dining room with efficiency that bordered on artistry, balancing multiple plates, remembering modifications without writing them down, intercepting problems before they became complaints. But there were moments when her mask slipped. When a guest spoke French to his companion, Lena's eyes tracked the conversation with understanding she shouldn't have had. When another table discussed a merger in the pharmaceutical industry, something that looked like pain flickered across her face. She knew things, understood context that didn't belong in a waitress's background. You're doing it again, his mother signed. Doing what? That thing where you turn into a detective instead of just asking questions like a normal person. Ethan almost smiled. I don't do normal. No. His mother's expression softened. You do careful. You do controlled. You do everything exactly right so nothing can hurt you or Jamie again. The mention of his son sent the familiar ache through Ethan's chest. Jamie was 7, brilliant, and still asked sometimes when his mother was coming home. Cancer didn't care about billion-dollar empires or how carefully you built your life. Sarah had been gone 2 years, and Ethan was still learning how to be both parents, still figuring out how to run Calloway Industries while making sure his son knew he was loved. I should get back, Ethan signed. Jamie's probably driving the nanny crazy with questions about quantum physics. That boy is too much like you. That boy is perfect. His mother squeezed his hand. So defensive. I'm just saying he inherited your need to understand everything. And maybe... She glanced toward where Lena was clearing a table, her movements precise and mechanical. Maybe you inherited it from somewhere too. Lena made it until her break, before her hands started shaking badly enough that she had to lock herself in the staff bathroom. She pressed her palms flat against the cool tile wall and counted breaths the way her therapist had taught her before she'd stopped being able to afford therapy. In and out, 4 counts each. Don't think about the man with the gray eyes. Don't think about how he'd looked at her like she was a puzzle to solve. Don't think about Victor. But that was the problem with carefully constructed walls. One crack, and everything came flooding back. Columbia University. The research lab where she'd spent 3 years developing adaptive communication technology. The night she'd trusted Victor Shaw with her prototype, with her code, with her notes. The morning she'd woken up to find her name stripped from every patent, every paper, every piece of work she'd poured her soul into, the lawsuit that had drained her savings. The lawyers who'd explained with detached professionalism that without hard evidence of original authorship, it was her word against a man with connections and money. The academic circles that had closed ranks, that had believed Victor's version where he was the genius and she was the assistant who'd gotten ideas above her station. The slow, systematic destruction of everything she'd built. Lena had disappeared after that, changed her last name from Hartwick to Hart, let her apartment go, stopped publishing, stopped fighting. She'd learned that survival sometimes meant becoming invisible. A knock on the bathroom door made her jump. Hart, you've got table 12 asking for you specifically. Lena splashed cold water on her face and straightened her uniform. In the mirror, she practiced the smile that didn't reach her eyes. When she returned to the floor, she understood why Marcus had sounded annoyed. Table 12 was Ethan Calloway and his mother, who'd requested to be seated in Lena's section for dessert and coffee. "I'm sorry to bother you," Ethan said when she approached, and he sounded like he actually meant it. "But my mother wanted to thank you properly. Diane Calloway's signs were warm, genuine. You made my evening lovely. Most places, I'm an inconvenience. You made me feel seen." Lena's throat closed up. She signed back, "Everyone deserves to be seen. Even you?" Diane's expression was too knowing, too kind. Lena didn't answer that. Couldn't. "My mother thinks I should hire you," Ethan said. There was something careful in his voice, like he was testing the water's temperature. "Our company has been looking for someone to help with accessibility initiatives. Someone who actually understands communication barriers instead of just reading about them in corporate diversity reports. I'm not looking for a job. I'm not offering one." He held her gaze. "I'm asking why someone who speaks at least 3 languages fluently, who understands sign language at a native level, and who clearly has more education than this place requires, is working tables at a restaurant." Lena's pulse hammered in her ears. This was exactly the kind of attention she couldn't afford. "Maybe I like working tables." "Maybe." Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Or maybe you're hiding from something. Someone." The world tilted. Lena's hands went numb. "That was out of line," Ethan said immediately. "I apologize. I have a bad habit of pushing when I should step back." His mother smacked his arm, a universal gesture of maternal disapproval that crossed all language barriers. "My son forgets how to be human sometimes," Diane signed to Lena. "He means well. He just has terrible execution." Despite everything, Lena almost smiled. "It's fine, I should—" She gestured vaguely toward the other tables. "Wait." Ethan pulled a business card from his wallet, wrote something on the back. "If you ever decide you're tired of hiding, or if you need help with whatever you're running from, call this number. No questions, no strings, just options." Lena took the card because refusing would have caused a scene. The front had his name embossed in silver. Ethan Calloway, CEO, Calloway Industries. On the back, he'd written a phone number in sharp, precise handwriting. "I don't need help," she said quietly. "Everyone needs help sometimes." Something in his voice suggested he was speaking from experience. Even people who've gotten very good at pretending they don't. She threw the card away twice, once in the trash bin at work, once in the dumpster outside her apartment building in Queens. Both times, she dug it back out before the night was over. Lena's studio apartment was the kind of place that made cozy sound like a generous euphemism. 400 square feet on the 5th floor of a building where the elevator worked maybe 3 days a week. But it was hers, paid for with cash from double shifts, and nobody asked questions about her past. She'd built a life here, small and careful. Morning shifts at a coffee shop, evening shifts at Aurelio, Sundays at a bookstore in Brooklyn. She spoke to her neighbors in polite monosyllables, never let anyone get close enough to ask why a woman with her education was slinging coffee and clearing tables. It was lonely. It was safe. Lena sat on her second-hand couch and stared at Ethan Calloway's business card until the words blurred. She'd looked him up on her ancient laptop. Hard to miss, honestly. Billionaire tech mogul, widowed young, single father to a 7-year-old son. Calloway Industries specialized in emerging technologies, with divisions in biotech, communications, and adaptive systems. The kind of company that would have hired her in a heartbeat 5 years ago. The kind of company that was probably partnered with or adjacent to Victor's empire. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, asking if she could cover someone's shift Thursday night. Lena texted back yes before she could think about it. More hours meant more money meant more security meant staying invisible. Except Ethan Calloway had seen her, really seen her, the way Diane had been seen at dinner. And now Lena couldn't shake the dangerous feeling that maybe, just maybe, being invisible wasn't the same as being safe. Ethan couldn't get the waitress out of his head. "You're doing it again," his assistant Rebecca said Wednesday morning, watching him stare at nothing during what should have been a productive meeting about Q4 projections. "Doing what?" That thing where you're physically present but mentally solving some mystery the rest of us aren't privy to. Rebecca had worked for him long enough to be blunt. What's going on? Ethan pulled his focus back to the conference room, to the 8 executives waiting for direction. Nothing. Continue. But it wasn't nothing. He'd spent the last 18 hours thinking about a woman who'd disappeared into the crowd the moment her shift ended, who'd refused help like it was poison, who'd looked at him with fear in her eyes when he'd suggested she was hiding. He knew that look. He'd seen it on Sarah's face when the diagnosis came back terminal, when she'd realized all the money and power in the world couldn't save her. Fear of the thing you couldn't control, couldn't fight, couldn't make sense of. What was Lena Hart running from? Sir? Rebecca's voice cut through his thoughts. The Shaw merger? Victor's team sent over the revised proposal. Ethan forced himself to focus on the document in front of him. Victor Shaw's company, Nexus Innovations, had developed a breakthrough in adaptive communication technology, AI-driven systems that could translate not just languages but communication styles, making digital interactions more accessible to people with disabilities. It was exactly the kind of innovation Callaway Industries specialized in scaling. The merger would be worth billions. It would also position them as leaders in accessibility tech, the kind of legacy work that mattered more than money. Victor Shaw himself was, Ethan searched for the right word, polished. A few years older than Ethan, Harvard-educated, came from old money but had built his own fortune. Charming in that practiced way that made Ethan instinctively distrust him, but nothing concrete to explain the feeling. What do we know about Shaw's background? Ethan asked. Rebecca pulled up a file on the screen. Born in Connecticut, Stanford undergrad, Harvard MBA, founded Nexus 6 years ago after working in R&D at several major tech firms. The adaptive communication platform launched 3 years ago and has been their primary revenue driver since. No red flags in the financials, no scandals, no... Who developed the technology? Rebecca blinked. Shaw did. It's his patent. I know it's his patent. I'm asking who actually developed it. The filing lists Victor Shaw as primary inventor, with a team of engineers who... Rebecca trailed off, frowning at her screen. That's odd. What? The original team members who worked on the project all left Nexus within 6 months of the patent being filed. That's unusual for a successful product launch. You'd expect them to stay for the equity upside. Ethan's instincts hummed. Get me their names. I want to know where they went, what they're doing now. All of them? All of them. Rebecca made a note. Anything else? Yes. Ethan stood, gathering his materials. I need to reschedule tomorrow's dinner with Shaw. Tell him something came up with Jamie, a school thing. But there's no... I know there's no school thing. I'm making one up. Ethan paused at the door. And Rebecca? This stays quiet. Don't mention to anyone that we're looking into Nexus's team history. Rebecca's expression sharpened with understanding. You think something's wrong with the merger? I think something doesn't feel right. And I've learned to trust that feeling. Thursday night, Lena was carrying a tray of champagne flutes when she saw him. Victor Shaw, sitting at table 6, holding court with 3 other men in suits that cost more than her car used to be worth. His laugh carried across the dining room, confident, masculine, the sound of a man who'd never doubted his right to take up space. The tray slipped. Lena caught it before the glasses toppled, but champagne sloshed over the rim, spattering her uniform. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to set the tray down on an empty table. Hart! Marcus appeared at her elbow. You good? I'm fine. Her voice came from somewhere far away. Just need a minute. You don't have a minute. Table 6 needs their order taken. The guy specifically requested someone who knows wine. Of course he did. Victor always requested the best, demanded perfection, took credit for excellence he hadn't earned. Send someone else, Lena managed. Everyone else is slammed. Just take their damn order. Lena's vision tunneled. She could see Victor from across the room, perfectly groomed as always, gesturing with his hands as he told some story that had his companions laughing. He looked exactly the same as he had the last time she'd seen him, in that courtroom, on the witness stand, explaining calmly to the judge that Dr. Lena Hartwick had been a valuable research assistant, but had unfortunately misunderstood her role in the project, that the work had been his from the beginning, that he was sorry she felt entitled to credit she hadn't earned. The judge had believed him. Everyone had believed him. Hart! Marcus's voice went sharp. What the hell is going on with you? I can't. Lena backed away from the dining room. I'm sorry, I can't. She grabbed her coat and walked out the back entrance into the alley. The October air bit through her thin uniform, but she kept walking until she reached the street corner, until she could breathe without feeling like her chest was being crushed. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, probably firing her. She should care about that. Should care that she'd just blown 3 years of careful invisibility. Instead, she pulled out Ethan Calloway's business card, the one she'd carried in her pocket for 2 days like a talisman, and stared at the number on the back. If you ever decide you're tired of hiding... Lena had spent 3 years being tired, 3 years being scared, 3 years watching Victor Shaw build an empire on work she'd created, while she scraped together rent money and pretended not to be dying inside. Her hand steadied as she dialed the number. Ethan answered on the second ring. This is Calloway. It's Lena Hart. Her voice sounded stronger than she felt. From the restaurant. You said if I needed help. Are you in danger? The question was immediate, razor sharp with focus. No, not physically, but I need to tell you something about Victor Shaw. The silence on the other end went very still. What about him? The technology you're buying, the adaptive communication platform that made Nexus Innovations worth billions? Lena closed her eyes. I built it, and Victor Shaw destroyed my life to steal it. Ethan sat in his study, the lights of Manhattan spread out below him through floor-to-ceiling windows, and listened to Lena Hart dismantle his billion-dollar merger with a voice that shook but never wavered. She told him everything. Columbia University, 6 years ago. Her PhD research in adaptive communication systems, the breakthrough algorithms she'd developed that could translate not just words but intent, context, emotional nuance. How she'd been working with Victor Shaw, who'd been a visiting professor with industry connections, who'd offered to help her find funding and partners. How she'd been stupid enough to trust him. He asked to see my complete documentation, Lena said. Said he had investors who wanted technical details before they'd commit. I gave him everything. My code, my research notes, my prototype. 3 months later, he filed patents under his own name. By the time I realized what he'd done, he'd already secured the intellectual property rights. You sued. Ethan kept his voice neutral, but his mind was racing through implications, legal angles, the kind of fraud that would torpedo not just the merger, but potentially his entire company if they were associated with it. I sued. I lost. Bitterness crept into her voice. I was a grad student with student loans and a public defender. He had a firm that cost more per hour than I made in a month. They buried me in motions, dragged it out until I couldn't afford to fight anymore. Then they countersued for defamation and harassment. The countersuit settled. I signed an NDA as part of the agreement, agreed to never publicly claim credit for the work, never contact Victor Shaw or his associates, never work in the field of communication technology again. Her laugh was hollow. In exchange, they dropped the countersuit, and I got to keep what was left of my reputation, which wasn't much. Ethan's jaw tightened. NDAs don't cover fraud. They do when you can't prove fraud. Victor was smart. He made sure every file I'd given him was only accessible through his accounts, made it look like he'd been the primary developer all along and I'd been trying to claim credit for collaborative work. And without evidence, evidence can be reconstructed, not by someone who's been legally barred from the industry and can barely afford rent. Lena's voice cracked. Mr. Calloway, I'm not asking you to fight my battles. When you mentioned the merger earlier this week, I looked it up, and I couldn't stay quiet knowing you were about to get into business with someone who steals other people's work. Ethan stood, paced to the window. Why now? Why tell me after years of silence? Because I'm tired, she said simply. And because your mother was right, everyone deserves to be seen. I've been invisible for 3 years, and I just watched Victor Shaw walk into the restaurant where I'm serving wine, and I realized I can't do this anymore. I can't keep disappearing. Something in Ethan's chest shifted. He thought about Jamie, about the lessons he tried to teach his son about integrity and standing up for what was right, about how Sarah had made him promise, in those last terrible weeks, that he'd raise their son to be a good man before being a successful one. Ms. Hart, Lena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay? Can you prove any of this? The pause stretched long enough that Ethan thought the call had dropped. I have my original research notes, Lena finally said. Handwritten, dated, from before I met Victor. I have some early emails discussing the project. And I have... Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. I have an external hard drive with backup files from my university account. I was supposed to destroy it as part of the settlement, but I couldn't. I know it's a violation of the NDA, and if Victor's lawyers found out, they could destroy me completely, but it's the only proof I have that the work was mine first. Ethan's mind shifted into the mode that had made him a billionaire by 32, calculating risks, analyzing angles, seeing 3 moves ahead. Don't touch that drive, don't mention it to anyone else, and don't go back to your apartment tonight. What? If Shaw saw you at the restaurant, if he recognized you, he didn't. I made sure to stay out of sight. That's why I left. Good. Ethan checked his watch. Almost 11. There's a hotel 2 blocks from Aurelio, the Meridian. Go there now. Check in under the name Sarah Calloway. His late wife's name felt strange on his tongue, but it would be untraceable to Lena's identity. I'll have my assistant call ahead and arrange it. Tomorrow morning we're going to talk about what happens next. Mr. Calloway, I can't afford... I'm covering it. And before you argue, this isn't charity. If what you're telling me is true, you might have just saved my company from a merger that would have eventually destroyed us. That's worth the cost of a hotel room. And if what I'm telling you isn't true, then I'll know by tomorrow afternoon, and we'll part ways. Ethan kept his voice gentle but firm. But Lena, I don't think you're lying. I think you're terrified, and I think you've been carrying this alone for too long. So let me help. Another long pause. Then, why? Because my mother was right, Ethan said. Everyone deserves to be seen, including you, Mom. The Meridian was the kind of hotel where Lena once would have stayed without thinking twice, back when she'd traveled to conferences, when her research had been funded, when her future had seemed bright and certain. Now, walking through the lobby in her stained uniform, she felt like an imposter. The desk clerk didn't bat an eye when she gave Sarah Calloway's name, just handed over a key card and directed her to the 11th floor with professional courtesy that suggested weird requests at midnight were perfectly normal. The room was ridiculous. King bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, marble bathroom, a view of the city that probably cost more per night than Lena's monthly rent. She stood in the middle of it all and started shaking. What had she done? She'd broken her NDA, contacted someone about Victor Shaw, trusted a billionaire she'd met exactly once, with information that could either save her or finish destroying her. Lena's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello? Ms. Hart, this is Rebecca Chen, Mr. Calloway's executive assistant. I'm calling to confirm you're settled at the hotel and to schedule tomorrow's meeting. Would 10 a.m. work for you? The efficiency in Rebecca's voice suggested she was used to handling strange situations with discretion. Yes. Where should I... A car will pick you up at 9:30. Someone will bring appropriate clothing to your room by 8 a.m. Mr. Calloway mentioned you left work in your uniform. I've estimated sizes based on security footage from the restaurant. I hope that's not too invasive. It should have been creepy. Instead, it was the kind of thorough thinking that came from someone who anticipated needs before they became problems. That's fine. Thank you. One more thing. Rebecca's voice shifted, became less assistant and more human. I don't know what you told Mr. Calloway tonight, but I've worked for him for 6 years. He doesn't make impulsive decisions, and he doesn't waste time on people he doesn't believe in. Whatever happens tomorrow, know that he's taking you seriously. Lena's throat closed. I appreciate that. After she hung up, Lena stood at the window and looked out at the city where she'd once had a future. Somewhere out there, Victor Shaw was probably having drinks, celebrating another successful day of being brilliant and successful and completely fraudulent. And somewhere in this same city, Ethan Calloway was probably making phone calls, running searches, doing exactly what Lena had been too scared and too broke to do for 3 years. Digging for truth. She pulled out her old laptop and logged into an email account she hadn't accessed in 2 years. The draft folder still held what she'd started writing the night before she'd signed the settlement. A detailed timeline of her work with Victor, every meeting, every file shared, every red flag she'd ignored because she'd been young and stupid and so damn trusting. Lena read through it all again, adding notes, correcting details, building the narrative that might finally, possibly, give her back her name. Outside, the city hummed with midnight traffic and sirens and lives being lived in the open. Lena had forgotten what that felt like. Being visible, taking up space, mattering. Tomorrow, she'd find out if she could remember how. The car that arrived at 9:30 wasn't a car. It was a statement. Blacktown car with windows tinted dark enough to hide secrets. A driver who opened the door without meeting her eyes. The clothes Rebecca had sent fit perfectly, which should have been reassuring but instead made Lena acutely aware of how thoroughly Ethan Calloway could access information when he wanted to. The navy dress was simple, professional, expensive in a way that didn't announce itself. She looked like someone who belonged in boardrooms again. She hated how good that felt. Manhattan morning traffic crawled past the windows. Lena watched people on sidewalks rushing to jobs, grabbing coffee, living normal lives where their biggest worry was making it to work on time. She'd been one of them once, before Victor, before the lawsuit that had turned her into someone who flinched at her own shadow. The Calloway Industries building rose 60 stories above Midtown, all steel and glass reflecting the sky like it owned it. The lobby alone was bigger than Lena's entire apartment, marble floors polished to a mirror shine, modern art on the walls that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime of double shifts. "Ms. Calloway?" The security guard's voice was respectful, professional. Using Ethan's late wife's name as her alias felt wrong on levels Lena couldn't articulate, but she nodded anyway. "Top floor, Mr. Calloway is expecting you." The elevator ride took 45 seconds. Lena counted each one, her reflection staring back from polished brass walls. She looked terrified, looked like someone about to make the biggest mistake of her life or the first right decision in 3 years, and she couldn't tell which. Rebecca met her when the doors opened. Late 30s, elegant in a way that came from confidence rather than trying, sharp eyes that took in everything and gave away nothing. "Ms. Hart, good morning." No mention of the fake name, the late-night arrangements, any of it. "Can I get you coffee? Water?" Coffee would be great. Lena's voice came out steadier than she felt. "How do you take it?" Black. Something that might have been approval flickered across Rebecca's face. "Mr. Calloway is finishing a call. He'll be ready in a few minutes. Please, have a seat." The waiting area had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, furniture that cost more than most people's cars, and a quiet that felt almost sacred. Lena perched on the edge of a leather chair that probably had a designer name she should recognize, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. The coffee arrived in a real cup, not disposable, with cream on the side even though she'd said black. Small courtesies that reminded Lena she was dealing with people who paid attention to details. Lena. Ethan Calloway stood in the doorway to his office, and in the morning light he looked different than he had at the restaurant. More human, maybe. Tired around the eyes in a way that suggested he hadn't slept much either. He'd lost the suit jacket, rolled his sleeves to his elbows, and somehow that made him more intimidating rather than less. "Thank you for coming," he said, like she'd had a choice, like she hadn't already burned her life down by making that phone call. "Please, come in." His office was exactly what she'd expected, and nothing like it. Yes, there was the massive desk, the view that made Manhattan look like a toy city, the art that screamed money and taste. But there were also framed photos of a dark-haired boy at various ages, a shelf full of books that looked actually read, and a corner dedicated to what appeared to be an elaborate marble-run construction set. "My son's latest engineering project," Ethan said, following her gaze. "He's convinced he can build one that runs on solar power. I told him the physics don't quite work that way, but he's determined to prove me wrong." "How old is he?" 7, going on 35. Something soft moved through Ethan's expression. "He asked me last night why I was still awake at midnight. I told him I was working on a problem that didn't have an easy answer. He suggested I build a flowchart. Apparently that's how you solve complex problems." Lena found herself almost smiling. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. Ethan gestured to the chairs arranged around a coffee table rather than across his desk. Less formal, more collaborative. "Lena, before we start, I need to be direct with you about something. I had my team working all night on background research. What I'm about to share might be difficult to hear. Her stomach dropped. You found proof I'm lying. No. Ethan's voice was firm. I found proof you've been telling the truth, and that Victor Shaw has been running this con longer and deeper than either of us realized. He opened a tablet, pulled up a document. 6 years ago, Victor Shaw worked in R&D at Helix Technologies. He left suddenly after what the company called creative differences. What they didn't say publicly is that 2 researchers filed internal complaints claiming Shaw had stolen their work. Both complaints were settled with NDAs and severance packages. The researchers left the industry entirely. Lena's hands went cold. 4 years ago, similar situation at Quantum Dynamics. A junior developer accused Shaw of taking credit for an algorithm she'd designed. The company launched an investigation, but before it concluded, the developer withdrew her complaint. She also signed an NDA, also left the industry. How did you find this? Lena's voice barely worked. Money and the right kind of lawyers who know how to ask questions without triggering confidentiality clauses. Ethan scrolled through more files. Then there's Nexus Innovations itself, the company Shaw founded 3 years ago with the technology he stole from you. In that time, he's gone through 17 employees in his R&D department. 17. That's not normal turnover. That's a pattern. A pattern of what? Finding brilliant people, using them until he's extracted everything valuable, then discarding them before they can realize what's happened. Ethan looked up from the tablet, and his eyes were hard. You weren't the first, Lena. You were just the one he made an example of. The room tilted. Lena pressed her hands flat against her thighs, focused on breathing. Why me? Why go so far with the lawsuit, the public destruction? The others just disappeared quietly. Because you fought back. You threatened to expose him, and he couldn't allow that. Ethan set the tablet aside. Shaw's entire fortune is built on other people's innovations. If even one person successfully proved theft, it would open the door for everyone else. So he made you radioactive, made sure anyone who thought about challenging him would look at what happened to Dr. Lena Hartwick and decide silence was safer. It worked. The bitterness in her voice surprised her. I'm serving wine and pretending I never had a PhD. I'm 30 years old and I live in a studio apartment with furniture from the street. I haven't written a line of code in 3 years because I'm terrified someone will recognize my work and I'll get sued again. She looked up at Ethan. He won. Not yet, he hasn't. What does that even mean? You can't use any of this in court. NDAs, sealed settlements, he's covered every angle. Legal angles, yes. Ethan leaned forward. But I'm not interested in legal angles right now. I'm interested in the truth. And more specifically, I'm interested in whether you can prove the adaptive communication technology was yours before Shaw ever touched it. Lena's pulse hammered. The hard drive I mentioned. It has dated files, development logs, everything. But using it violates my NDA. Shaw's lawyers made it very clear that if I ever disclosed anything about the case or the technology, they can sue you for breach of contract, I know. Ethan's expression didn't change. But they can't sue you if you're already in litigation with them for fraud. Offensive legal strategy. We file first, establish that the NDA was signed under duress and false pretenses, and suddenly your evidence becomes admissible as proof of the original fraud. That's insane. That would take years, cost millions. Yes. Lena stared at him. Why would you do that? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. And getting involved in this kind of legal battle when you're trying to run a company, I'm not trying to run a company. I am running one. A company that's about to enter a billion-dollar merger with a man who's built his entire fortune on stolen intellectual property. Ethan's voice went cold. If I proceed with this deal knowing what I know now, I become complicit in the fraud. Every innovation Nexus produces becomes suspect. Every contract we sign becomes a liability. And when it all eventually falls apart, because it will, my company's reputation goes down with Shaw's. So this is about protecting Callaway Industries. Partly. He didn't deny it. But it's also about the fact that I have a 7-year-old son who thinks I walk on water because I've spent his entire life teaching him that being good matters more than being successful. That integrity isn't negotiable. That you stand up for what's right even when it's hard. Ethan's jaw tightened. How do I look at Jamie and tell him those things if I'm making deals with men like Victor Shaw? The honesty of it hit Lena harder than any legal strategy could have. You really believe that? My wife died 2 years ago. Cancer. We had the best doctors, the best hospitals, every advantage money could buy, and it didn't matter. His voice roughened. You know what she told me the week before she died? She said money's just a tool. What matters is what you build with it, who you help, whether you leave things better than you found them. He met Lena's eyes. I can't bring Sarah back, but I can make sure our son grows up in a world where thieves like Victor Shaw don't win just because they're better at lying than good people are at fighting. Lena's throat closed up. She'd spent 3 years believing she was alone in this, that fighting back was impossible, that the best she could hope for was to stay hidden and stay safe. And here was this billionaire she'd met exactly twice, offering to burn his own merger to the ground because it was the right thing to do. I need to see the hard drive, Ethan said quietly. I need to know exactly what we're working with before we make any moves. Can you get it? It's in a storage unit in Queens. I couldn't risk keeping it at my apartment in case... She trailed off. In case Shaw's people came looking. Ethan nodded. Smart. We'll send someone to retrieve it. What else do you have? Original research notes, emails, anything that establishes timeline and authorship? Lena thought about the notebooks she'd kept, the meticulous documentation that had been her habit since grad school. I have 3 years' worth of handwritten research journals. I kept them when I left Columbia, even though my advisor told me to destroy everything. They're dated, witnessed. I used to have my research partner sign off on major breakthroughs as a best practice. Who was your research partner? Dr. James Chen. He's at MIT now teaching. We haven't spoken since the lawsuit. Because of the NDA. Because I was embarrassed. The admission hurt. Because he warned me not to trust Victor and I didn't listen. Because watching me self-destruct was probably painful and awkward and easier to just not deal with. Ethan made a note on his tablet. We'll need to talk to him. If he can corroborate your timeline, your methodology, it strengthens the case significantly. He won't want to get involved. James is up for tenure, and getting dragged into a lawsuit with someone like Victor Shaw, let me worry about that. Ethan stood, paced to the window. Here's what's going to happen. Today, we secure your evidence. Tomorrow, my legal team starts building the case. By Monday, we'll have enough to approach Shaw's lawyers with an ultimatum. An ultimatum? Shaw returns the patents to you, makes a public statement acknowledging your authorship, and pays restitution for damages. In exchange, we don't pursue criminal fraud charges or go public with evidence of his other thefts. Lena's laugh came out harsh. He'll never agree to that. Victor would rather burn everything down than admit he was wrong. Then we let him burn. Ethan turned back to face her. But we give him the chance to do this quietly first. Not because he deserves it, but because it's faster and cleaner if he cooperates. And the merger? Dead. I'm calling Shaw this afternoon to cancel negotiations. He'll know something's wrong. He'll start destroying evidence. He'll assume I found financial irregularities or change my mind about the deal structure. Men like Shaw always assume it's about money because that's all they understand. Ethan's smile was sharp. By the time he realizes what's actually happening, we'll already be 3 moves ahead. Lena wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this could actually work, that 3 years of running could end with something other than more loss. But hope was dangerous. Hope was what had gotten her into this mess in the first place. What do you want from me? She asked. In all of this, what's your angle? Because nobody helps someone like me without expecting something in return. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. You're right. I do want something. Her heart sank. I want you to work for me. Lena blinked. What? Callaway Industries has an entire division dedicated to accessibility technology. We build tools that help people communicate across barriers, language, disability, cognitive differences. It's some of our most important work, and it's being led by people who are technically competent but don't have your vision. He crossed back to where she sat. I've read the abstracts from your original research. What you were building wasn't just an algorithm, it was a fundamental rethinking of how humans connect with each other through technology. That research is 3 years old. The field has moved on. The field has moved on to incremental improvements on the foundation you built. Shaw's been selling watered-down versions of your own ideas back to the market. Ethan's expression was intent. But you know what the next breakthrough looks like. You've been thinking about it, haven't you? Even while you were serving tables and pretending to be someone else, you couldn't stop seeing the problems that need solving. He was right, and Lena hated that he could read her that clearly. She had been thinking about it. Every time she signed with a deaf customer, every time she helped someone struggling with English navigate a menu, every time she watched people talk past each other because the words didn't capture what they actually meant. The work had never stopped living in her head. I can't work in communication technology. The NDA specifically prohibits, once we break the NDA, that clause becomes void. And even before that, you could consult privately. Advise on direction, review proposals, help guide strategy. Ethan's voice gentled. Lena, I'm not offering you charity. I'm offering you the chance to do what you're actually meant to be doing, what you're brilliant at. And yes, it helps my company, but it also gets you back in the field where you belong. I don't belong anywhere right now. The words came out raw. I'm a 30-year-old ex-academic with a gap in her resume the size of a crater and enough legal baggage to sink a ship. Even if we somehow win against Victor, nobody's going to hire Dr. Lena Hartwick. I'm poison. Then don't be Dr. Lena Hartwick. Ethan sat down across from her again. Be the person who brought down one of the biggest frauds in tech history. Be the person who fought back when everyone told her to stay quiet. Be the person who rebuilt her entire life from nothing and came out stronger. He paused. Be the person my mother saw at that restaurant. Someone who notices when others are struggling and steps up to help even when it costs her something. Lena's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refused to cry in front of this man who'd already seen too much of her weakness. I need to think about it. Fair enough. Ethan pulled a phone from his pocket. Not his regular one, she noticed. A burner, probably. This is for you. Encrypted, untraceable. My number's programmed in. Rebecca's number. My head of security. Use it for anything related to this situation. Your regular phone stays off except for normal activities. We assume Shaw might try to track you once he realizes something's wrong. The professionalism of it was almost funny, like she'd stepped into a thriller instead of her actual life. You really think he'd go that far? I think a man who's built a fortune on fraud won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to protect it. Ethan's expression went hard. Which is why you're not going back to your apartment. Rebecca has a corporate housing unit available. Fully furnished, secure building, completely separated from your name. For how long? As long as it takes. Lena looked at the phone in her hand, at this man who'd reorganized his entire day around helping a waitress he barely knew, at the expensive office that represented a world she'd thought was lost to her forever. Why do I feel like I'm making a deal with the devil? Ethan's laugh was sudden, genuine. Because you're smart enough to know that nobody helps anyone without complications. But I'm not the devil, Lena. I'm just a man who's tired of watching people like Victor Shaw win. And if this goes wrong, if we can't prove fraud, if the lawsuit drags out for years, if it destroys both our lives, then at least we'll go down fighting instead of pretending we didn't see the problem. He stood, offered his hand. I can't promise this works, but I can promise I'm all in once we start. No backing out, no settling quietly, no protecting the deal over protecting what's right. Lena stood too. His hand was warm, calloused in a way that surprised her. Not the soft hands of someone who'd never worked. The hands of someone who built things. Okay, she said. Let's take down a billionaire. The meeting with Ethan's legal team started at 2 and didn't end until almost 7. 4 lawyers, 3 women, 1 man, all of them sharp enough to cut glass and professional enough not to show they were shocked by anything Lena told them. They asked questions that made her relive every terrible moment of the last 3 years, documented everything with recorders and notes, built timelines and evidence maps that turned her personal nightmare into a case strategy. Jennifer Park, the lead attorney, was maybe 45 with gray-streaked hair she didn't bother hiding and eyes that missed nothing. The good news, Jennifer said when they finally broke for coffee, is that you documented everything. The bad news is that Shaw's team did too, and they framed their documentation to make you look like a disgruntled employee with delusions of grandeur. So we're back where we started. No. Jennifer's smile was predatory. We're actually in a much better position because Shaw got comfortable. He won the first round, so he thinks the threat is neutralized. That makes people sloppy. Victor's not sloppy. Everyone's sloppy when they think they've already won. Jennifer pulled up something on her laptop. We've been digging into Nexus's patent filings. There are inconsistencies, technical descriptions that don't quite match the final code, implementation details that shift between drafts. Small things, the kind Shaw probably thought nobody would ever look at closely because who challenges a granted patent? Someone with resources and motivation, the younger lawyer, Marcus, added, which we now have thanks to Mr. Calloway. Lena glanced across the conference room to where Ethan sat with Rebecca, both of them working through what appeared to be the legitimate business of running a company while occasionally checking in on the legal discussion. He'd been there for 6 hours, could have delegated this entire thing, but hadn't. Ms. Hart? Jennifer's voice pulled her attention back. I need to be very clear with you about what you're getting into. This won't be quick or easy. Shaw will fight with everything he has. He'll drag your name through the mud again. He'll make this public and ugly, and there will be days when you'll want to give up. Are you prepared for that? Lena thought about the last 3 years, about being invisible, about serving wine to people who didn't see her, living in a studio apartment that felt like a cell, carrying the weight of stolen work and destroyed dreams until she couldn't remember what it felt like to walk without that burden. I've been giving up for 3 years, she said quietly. I'm ready to try something different. Jennifer nodded like Lena had passed some kind of test. Good. Then let's get to work. By the time they finished, Manhattan had gone dark outside the windows. Lena's head ached from details and legalese, her hands cramped from signing documents, and she felt simultaneously exhausted and more alive than she had in years. The car's waiting downstairs, Rebecca said, appearing with Lena's coat. I'll ride with you to the housing unit, get you settled. Tomorrow's Saturday. Mr. Calloway suggested you take the day to rest. Gather whatever you need from your apartment. Monday morning, we'll start accessing your storage unit and retrieving the evidence. What about Victor? The merger. Mr. Calloway is calling him shortly to cancel the deal. Rebecca's expression stayed professionally neutral, but something glinted in her eyes. Should be an interesting conversation. Ethan intercepted them at the elevator. He looked as tired as Lena felt, sleeves still rolled up, tie abandoned somewhere around hour 4. Thank you, Lena said, because what else could she say? For all of this. For believing me. Thank Rebecca. She's the one who's been organizing everything while I pretended to have opinions about quarterly projections. His smile was slight but genuine. How are you holding up? Terrified, exhausted, kind of furious, actually. Good. Stay furious. It's useful. Ethan glanced at Rebecca. Make sure she eats something. She hasn't had anything since coffee this morning. I'm 30 years old, Lena pointed out. I can feed myself. Can you? Because when's the last time you actually did? The question was too perceptive, too close to the truth. Lena had gotten good at surviving on coffee and whatever staff meals she could grab between shifts. Actual meals, the kind you sat down for, the kind that weren't about just stopping hunger. Those had become luxuries she couldn't justify. Point taken, she said quietly. There's a 24-hour diner 2 blocks from the housing unit, Rebecca offered. Good pancakes. Very bad coffee, but the food solid. After they'd gone, Ethan stood alone in his office and stared at his phone for a full minute before making the call. Victor Shaw answered on the 3rd ring, voice smooth and confident. Ethan, I was hoping to hear from you. The team's been working on those revised projections you requested. I'm calling to withdraw from the merger. Silence. Then, I'm sorry, what? Calloway Industries is no longer interested in pursuing the Nexus acquisition. Effective immediately. Ethan kept his voice level, businesslike. My team will send over the formal documentation on Monday, but I wanted to give you the courtesy of a personal call. The courtesy? Victor's laugh was sharp. Ethan, we've been negotiating this deal for 6 months. The contracts are 90% finalized. What the hell happened? I've reconsidered the strategic fit. It's no longer aligned with our company direction. That's corporate speak for bullshit. What's really going on? Does it matter? Ethan paced to the window, looked out at the city lights. Business decisions change. I'm sure you'll find another buyer for your technology. My technology is worth billions. You know that. Everyone knows that. Victor's voice went hard. If this is a negotiation tactic to lower the price, it's not. The deal is dead, Victor. Move on. You can't just walk away from this. We have preliminary agreements, good faith deposits, which will all be returned per the terms of those agreements. My lawyers have already reviewed the exit clauses. We're clear. Ethan paused, let the silence stretch. Unless there's something in those contracts you're worried about disclosing? What's that supposed to mean? It means exactly what I said. Is there any reason you'd be concerned about us conducting due diligence if we decided to exit the deal? Victor's breathing changed over the line. Of course not. Nexus is completely transparent. Every filing is clean, every patent properly documented. Good. Then we shouldn't have any problems. Ethan's voice stayed cold. Goodbye, Victor. Best of luck with your next venture. He ended the call before Shaw could respond. His hands were shaking slightly. Adrenaline, anger, the particular tension that came from deliberately poking a dangerous animal to see how it would react. Rebecca appeared in the doorway. How'd he take it? Like a man who's hiding something and isn't sure if I know what it is. Ethan set the phone down carefully. He'll start making calls tonight, trying to figure out what spooked me, whether someone talked, how much I actually know. Will he figure out it's connected to Lena? Eventually, which is why we move fast. Ethan checked his watch. Almost 9. Jamie would be in bed by now, probably reading under the covers with a flashlight, even though his nanny Maria had strict rules about bedtime. I need to get home, make sure Lena's settled, and have security increase monitoring on both her location and Shaw's known associates. Already done. Rebecca handed him his jacket. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. This is going to get messy, but it's the right thing. Tell me that in 6 months when Shaw's lawyers are filing motions and the media's having a field day with the story. I'll tell you the same thing then. Rebecca's expression softened. Sarah would be proud of you. You know that, right? Ethan's chest tightened. Yeah, I hope so. The diner Rebecca had recommended was exactly as advertised. Questionable coffee, excellent pancakes, the kind of worn-in comfort that came from decades of serving people at their worst and best. Lena sat in a corner booth and worked her way through a stack of blueberry pancakes while Rebecca answered emails on her phone with one hand and ate French toast with the other. Can I ask you something? Lena said after the waitress refilled their terrible coffee. Depends on the question. Why does Ethan care this much? I mean, I get protecting the company, avoiding a bad merger, but the level of personal investment, the resources he's throwing at this, it feels like more than just business. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, considering. How much do you know about his wife? Just that she died. Cancer. Sarah was a civil rights attorney, spent her entire career taking cases nobody else would touch. Wrongful termination, housing discrimination, police misconduct. Cases that paid nothing and made powerful people angry. Rebecca's voice went soft. She died defending a whistleblower who'd exposed corruption in a major pharmaceutical company. The stress probably accelerated the cancer, but she wouldn't drop the case even when she was sick. Said some things mattered more than survival. Lena's throat closed. Ethan watched the woman he loved destroy herself, fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Watched her choose integrity over comfort, over safety, over everything. Rebecca met Lena's eyes. You think he's going to walk away from someone in your situation? Someone who got crushed by exactly the kind of powerful fraud Sarah spent her life fighting? Not a chance. But I'm nobody. Just a waitress who made bad decisions. You're a brilliant researcher who trusted the wrong person and got destroyed for it. That's not the same as making bad decisions. That's being the victim of someone else's very calculated crimes. Rebecca's expression hardened. And Victor Shaw is exactly the kind of person Sarah would have taken down without blinking. So yeah, this is personal for Ethan. Maybe not in the way you think, but personal nonetheless. They finished eating in comfortable silence. The housing unit turned out to be a furnished apartment in a building with actual security, elevators that worked, and neighbors who probably didn't steal packages. It was small but clean, infinitely better than Lena's studio, and somehow that made her want to cry. Thank you, she told Rebecca at the door, for everything today, for believing this is worth doing. Thank me when we win. Rebecca handed her a card. My personal cell is on there. You need anything, anytime you call. And Lena, Get some sleep. Monday starts the real work. After Rebecca left, Lena stood in the middle of the quiet apartment and finally let herself feel the full weight of what she'd set in motion. She'd spent 3 years running, hiding, surviving, and in the space of 24 hours, she'd stopped running and started fighting back. It was terrifying. It was also the first time in 3 years that she'd felt like herself. Her new phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number that resolved into Ethan's contact info. Rebecca says you're settled. Good. Try to rest this weekend. Monday gets complicated. Lena stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Thank you. For all of it. For seeing me. The response came quickly. Everyone deserves to be seen, even when they've gotten very good at hiding. Lena set the phone down and walked to the window. Somewhere in this city, Victor Shaw was probably making calls, trying to understand what had just happened to his billion-dollar deal. And somewhere else, maybe in a brownstone, with a kid who asked too many questions and built marble runs in his father's office, Ethan Calloway was preparing to go to war with a man who'd built an empire on lies. And Lena Hart, Dr. Lena Hartwick, was finally ready to reclaim her name. The storage unit in Queens smelled like dust and defeat. Lena stood in the doorway Monday morning with Ethan beside her and a security specialist named Marcus waiting by the van, and she couldn't make herself step inside. 3 years of her life were packed into a 10-by-10 concrete box, research notebooks, the hard drive that violated her NDA, boxes of papers she'd been too afraid to throw away and too broken to look at. Take your time, Ethan said quietly. I don't want to take my time. I want this to be over. Lena forced herself forward, her shoes scraping against concrete. The boxes were exactly where she'd left them, labeled in her own handwriting from a lifetime ago. I haven't opened these since I moved them here. Then let's see what we've got. The hard drive was in a waterproof case inside a box marked kitchen. Lena had learned paranoia the hard way, hide the valuable things where nobody would think to look. Her hands shook as she pulled it out. This small piece of technology that held the only proof she'd ever existed as someone other than a waitress. Is it going to work? Ethan asked. After 3 years in storage? Only one way to find out. They packed everything into Marcus's van, 6 boxes total, 3 years of academic work reduced to something that fit in the back of a vehicle. Lena sat in the passenger seat on the drive back to Manhattan and tried not to think about how fragile this all was. One corrupted hard drive, one piece of missing documentation, one technicality Victor's lawyers could exploit, and it would all fall apart. Stop spiraling, Ethan said from the back seat where he was working on his laptop. I'm not spiraling. You're breathing like you're about to have a panic attack, and you've checked your phone 6 times in the last 10 minutes. That's spiraling. He looked up. We'll know what we're working with in a few hours. Until then, catastrophizing doesn't help. You catastrophize when you're stressed. I've seen you do it. That's different. I catastrophize productively. I run scenarios, calculate risk, build contingency plans. His smile was slight. You're just imagining worst-case outcomes without any solutions attached. How is that different? One's strategic anxiety, the other's just regular anxiety. Lena found herself almost laughing despite everything. You're ridiculous. I'm a billionaire who's about to go to war with another billionaire over stolen technology and a waitress I met a week ago. Ridiculous is pretty accurate. The Callaway Industries tech lab was nothing like the cramped research space Lena remembered from Columbia. Clean rooms, equipment that cost more than some countries' GDP, engineers who treated 3-year-old hard drives like archaeological artifacts. A woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, no relation to Ethan's late wife, which Lena had confirmed immediately because the coincidence was too weird, headed the forensics team. Okay, Sarah said, connecting the hard drive to an isolated system. Let's see what we've got. The drive spun up. Data started populating on screens. Lena watched file structures appear, folders organized by date, by project phase, by type of research. Her entire doctoral dissertation was there. The early algorithm development, the prototype code. 3 years of her life, dated and time-stamped and completely, undeniably hers. Holy hell, Sarah breathed. This is comprehensive. You've got development logs, version control history, even commented code explaining your thought process. I was always paranoid about losing work, Lena said. Her voice sounded far away. My advisor in undergrad lost 6 months of research to a corrupted file. I backed up everything obsessively after that. Best paranoia I've ever seen. Oh, Sarah pulled up a comparison screen. Give me Shaw's patent filing. I want to see how much he changed. Jennifer Park appeared with the documents. She'd been working with Ethan's team all weekend, building the case structure, identifying weaknesses in Victor's story. Now she stood behind Sarah's chair and watched as lines of code populated side by side. He barely changed anything, Jennifer said after a few minutes. Some variable names, reorganized a few functions, but the core architecture is identical. Not just identical. Sarah highlighted sections. Look at this comment block. Shaw left your comment in the code. He just changed the header attribution. And here, this debugging note references a problem you solved in version 3.2. That version is on your hard drive dated 8 months before Shaw filed his patent. Lena's knees went weak. She sat down hard in the nearest chair. That's not all, Sarah continued, pulling up metadata. File creation dates, modification history, even the computer ID that generated the original files. It's all here. This code was written on a machine registered to Columbia University's research network. Shaw's patent filing claims independent development, but unless he had access to Columbia's servers, which he didn't, there's no way he could have these exact file signatures. Can his lawyers argue the data's been tampered with? Ethan asked. They can argue anything, but digital forensics don't lie. We can trace every edit, every save, every version, and it all points back to Lena as the original author. Sarah looked up, and her expression was fierce. This is airtight. Shaw didn't just steal your work, he was lazy about it. Arrogant enough to think nobody would ever check this closely. Jennifer was already on her phone. I'm calling Shaw's legal team. We need to set up a meeting before end of business today. That fast? Lena's voice cracked. That fast. We have him dead to rights, and the longer we wait, the more time he has to prepare a defense. Jennifer's smile was sharp. Strike while he's still off balance from the merger falling through. The meeting was set for 4 o'clock at a neutral law office in Midtown. Victor Shaw's lead attorney was a man named Richard Cross. 60, expensive suit, the kind of lawyer who defended pharmaceutical companies and won. He arrived with 2 associates and an expression that suggested this was an irritating waste of his valuable time. Victor himself looked exactly as Lena remembered. 45, fit in that way that came from personal trainers and carefully managed diets. Silver at his temples that made him look distinguished rather than old. He smiled when he saw Ethan, extended his hand like they were still friendly business associates. Ethan, I have to admit, I'm curious what this is about. Your people were very cryptic on the phone. Have a seat, Victor. Ethan didn't shake his hand. I think you'll want to be sitting down for this conversation. Victor's smile flickered. He took in the room, Jennifer and her team on one side, Ethan beside them, and then his eyes landed on Lena. She watched recognition hit him like a physical blow. His face went pale, then flushed, then carefully neutral. Ms. Hartwick, he said, and his voice stayed smooth. This is unexpected. Dr. Hartwick, Lena corrected quietly. I still have the degree you tried to take. Richard Cross frowned. I'm sorry, but who? Lena Hartwick worked with my client 6 years ago at Columbia University, Jennifer cut in. She developed the core technology that your client later patented under his own name and built Nexus Innovations around. That's absurd. Victor's composure snapped back into place. We settled this matter years ago. Dr. Hartwick signed an NDA obtained under false pretenses and enforced through fraudulent legal action. Jennifer slid a folder across the table. We have documentation proving Dr. Hartwick was the original developer of the adaptive communication technology. File metadata, version control history, development logs, all of it time-stamped and authenticated. Richard opened the folder. His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Where did you obtain this material? From Dr. Hartwick's personal research archives. Materials she retained from her doctoral work. Materials she was contractually obligated to destroy. Material she was coerced into agreeing to destroy through a settlement based on your client's fraudulent claims. Jennifer leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to review that evidence tonight. Tomorrow, we're going to have another meeting where you acknowledge what we both know is true, that Victor Shaw stole Dr. Hartwick's intellectual property, filed false patent claims, and has been profiting from fraud for 3 years. This is outrageous, Victor started. Shut up, Richard told him. Not rudely, just professionally. The voice of a lawyer who knew when his client needed to stop talking. He looked at Jennifer. What do you want? Full return of all patents to Dr. Hartwick, public acknowledgement of her authorship, financial restitution for lost wages, emotional distress, and punitive damages. And a guarantee that Mr. Shaw will not pursue any claims against Dr. Hartwick for violation of the NDA, given that the NDA itself was obtained fraudulently. In exchange for? We don't pursue criminal charges for fraud, theft of intellectual property, or perjury. We keep this out of the media. Mr. Shaw retains whatever legitimate business assets he has that aren't based on Dr. Hartwick's stolen technology. Richard's laugh was cold. You want my client to dismantle his entire company and publicly admit to fraud. In what universe would we agree to that? In the universe where the alternative is federal prosecution and civil litigation that will drag on for years, cost millions, and result in the same outcome except with criminal penalties attached. Jennifer's voice stayed level. We have the evidence. We have multiple witnesses. And we have the resources to pursue this to the absolute end. Your client can cooperate and salvage something, or he can fight and lose everything. Victor stood abruptly. I'm not sitting here listening to this. Lena Hartwick was a mediocre researcher who couldn't handle the competitive nature of academic development. I gave her opportunities, mentored her, and she repaid that by trying to claim credit for collaborative work. The courts already decided this. The courts decided based on false evidence and your ability to outspend a grad student. Ethan spoke for the first time since the meeting started, and his voice cut like ice. But you're not dealing with a grad student anymore. You're dealing with me. And I have better lawyers, more money, and a personal interest in watching you pay for what you did. Something dangerous flickered across Victor's face. This is really about the merger, isn't it? You're manufacturing this entire situation because you got cold feet about the deal. I canceled the deal because due diligence revealed you're a fraud. Ethan stood, and even though Victor was taller, somehow Ethan seemed to fill more space. Every innovation Nexus has produced is suspect now. Every patent questionable. I started digging into your history, Victor, found some interesting patterns. Other researchers who left the industry after working with you, other settlements with NDAs attached. You've been running this con for a decade. Prove it. I will. In court, in public, in every business journal and tech publication that will run the story. Ethan's smile was brutal. You think the merger falling through was bad? Wait until every company you've ever partnered with starts questioning whether their technology is actually theirs. Wait until every investor realizes they funded stolen intellectual property. Your entire empire is built on sand, and I'm about to pull the foundation out from under it. Richard put a hand on Victor's arm. We need to discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss. This is extortion. This is justice, Lena said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She'd been silent for most of the meeting, content to let the lawyers handle it. But something in Victor's dismissal of her as mediocre had ignited a fury she'd been suppressing for 3 years. You didn't just steal my work, Victor. You destroyed my career, my reputation, my ability to do the thing I loved most in the world. You made me sign away my own identity because you couldn't stand the idea that someone might realize the brilliant Victor Shaw wasn't actually brilliant at all. Lena, Dr. Hartwick, she corrected again, harder this time. And you know what the worst part is? I trusted you. I believed you when you said you wanted to help me. I was 27 years old and stupid enough to think mentorship actually meant something. She stood, faced him directly. But I'm not 27 anymore, and I'm not afraid of you. So you can cooperate with this settlement, or you can watch while we take everything you built on my stolen work and burn it to the ground. Your choice. The room went silent. Victor stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time, not the frightened grad student he'd destroyed, but the woman she'd become in the aftermath. And Lena could see the exact moment he realized he'd made a mistake underestimating her. We'll review the evidence, Richard said carefully, and we'll be in touch tomorrow with our response. You have until noon, Jennifer told him. After that, we file the lawsuit and contact every media outlet we can find. This story goes public, and your client becomes the face of academic fraud." After they left, Lena's legs gave out. She sat down hard, adrenaline draining so fast she felt dizzy. Ethan crouched beside her chair. "You okay?" "I told Victor Shaw to go to hell in front of his lawyer. I think I'm having an out-of-body experience." "You told him the truth. There's a difference." Ethan's hand was warm on her shoulder. "That took courage. That took 3 years of suppressed rage and your legal team backing me up. Not exactly courage. Take the win, Lena. You looked him in the eye and didn't flinch. That matters." Jennifer was packing up her materials. "They'll counteroffer. Probably try to negotiate down the restitution, definitely push back on the public acknowledgement. But we have them. Shaw knows it, and more importantly, Richard Cross knows it. He's too good a lawyer to fight a losing battle." "What if they don't settle?" Lena asked. "Then we go to court and win. It'll take longer, cost more, and be significantly messier. But we'll win." Jennifer's expression softened slightly. "Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow's going to be intense regardless of how they respond." Ethan drove Lena back to the housing unit himself, Rebecca having already left for the day. The car was some expensive thing that probably cost more than Lena's entire graduate education, but it drove like a normal vehicle, and Ethan handled Manhattan traffic with the casual competence of someone who'd been doing it his whole life. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said as they crossed into Queens. "Depends on the question. What happens if we win? If Victor settles, if I get the patents back, if everyone knows the truth, what happens to me then?" Ethan glanced at her. "What do you want to happen?" "I don't know. For 3 years, all I wanted was to survive. I didn't let myself think past that." She watched the city pass by outside the window. "But now that surviving might actually lead somewhere, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with it." "You build something new. You take the patents and the technology, and you develop it the way you originally intended. You hire a team, you launch a company, you change the industry that tried to erase you. Just like that? Just like that. Though probably with significant help from lawyers and business managers and people who know what they're doing." He turned onto her street. "Or you could work for Callaway Industries, head up our accessibility division, have resources and support without the pressure of starting from scratch. Either way, you're not going back to serving tables." "Maybe I liked serving tables." Ethan's look was flat. "Lena. Okay, I hated serving tables, but it was simple, anonymous, safe." "Safe is overrated." He pulled up in front of her building. "And you weren't built for simple. You were built to create things that change how people communicate. To solve problems nobody else even sees. That's not simple work." Lena unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't get out. "Why are you really doing this? And don't say it's about protecting your company or honoring your wife's legacy. There's something else." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "When Sarah was dying, she made me promise something. She said that Jamie needed to grow up knowing his father was the kind of man who did the right thing even when it cost him something. That money and success didn't mean anything if I used them to insulate myself from other people's suffering." He looked at Lena directly. "I've spent 2 years trying to figure out how to keep that promise while running a company and raising a kid and not falling apart. And then you signed to my mother in that restaurant, and I saw someone who needed help, someone I could actually help. So yeah, maybe part of this is selfish. Maybe I'm doing it because it makes me feel like I'm keeping my promise to Sarah. But that doesn't make it less true that you deserve justice. Your wife sounds like she was extraordinary." "She was. Stubborn, brilliant, impossible to argue with. You would have liked her." Ethan's smile was sad. "She would have liked you too. Would have probably recruited you to work on pro bono cases defending other people Victor Shaw screwed over." Lena's throat tightened. "I'm sorry you lost her." "Oh, me too. Every day." He straightened in his seat, visibly pulling himself back together. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we find out if Shaw's smart enough to settle or stupid enough to fight." Victor Shaw's response came at 11:30 the next morning. Richard Cross delivered it personally to Jennifer's office with Victor notably absent. Lena sat between Ethan and Jennifer and tried to keep breathing while Richard laid out the counteroffer. "My client is willing to acknowledge Dr. Hartwick's contributions to the early research that led to the adaptive communication platform. He's prepared to offer a financial settlement of $2 million in exchange for Dr. Hartwick's agreement to not pursue further claims and to not disparage Nexus Innovations publicly. No, Lena said immediately. Richard blinked. I'm sorry? No. That's not acknowledging my contributions. That's buying my silence again. I want the patents returned. I want public recognition that the technology was mine. I want the truth, not hush money. Dr. Hartwick, $2 million is a substantial... I don't care if it's $20 million. I'm not selling my work back to the man who stole it. Lena looked at Jennifer. We're not taking this, right? Not even close. Jennifer turned to Richard. Here's our counter. Full patent transfer, $10 million in restitution, public statement acknowledging Dr. Hartwick as the original developer, and a guarantee that Mr. Shaw will not claim any rights to future developments based on the original technology. Non-negotiable. You're asking my client to commit professional suicide. We're asking your client to stop profiting from theft. Slightly different. Jennifer's smile was cold. You have until 5 p.m. today. After that, we file the lawsuit, and I start making calls to every tech journalist I know. Richard left without another word. The silence in the office felt heavy, expectant. Will he take it? Lena asked. He'll take it, or some version of it. The public statement is what Shaw will fight hardest against. That's the part that destroys his reputation beyond repair. Jennifer checked her phone. But Cross is too smart to let this go to trial. He knows we win, and he knows the longer it drags out, the more damage it does to his client. The response came at 4:45. Richard Cross, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 6 hours, with an acceptance letter signed by Victor Shaw. Full patent transfer. $8 million in restitution. Public statement to be released jointly, acknowledging Dr. Lena Hartwick as the original developer of the adaptive communication technology platform. Lena stared at the document until the words blurred. Is this real? It's real. Jennifer was already reviewing the contract language. We'll want our own people to verify everything. Make sure there are no hidden clauses. But yes, Lena, you won. She didn't feel like she'd won. She felt numb, disconnected, like she was watching someone else's life play out in front of her. 3 years of running, hiding, being invisible, and it ended with a signature on a contract. What happens now? Her voice sounded strange. Now we finalize the details, transfer the patents, and release the public statement. Shaw will try to spin it as an amicable resolution to a collaborative dispute, but the facts speak for themselves. Jennifer looked up. You'll need to decide what you want to do with the technology, whether you want to develop it independently, license it, or partner with a larger company for resources. Ethan, who'd been silent through most of the negotiation, finally spoke. Take the night to process this. Tomorrow we can start talking about next steps. But tonight, just let yourself feel whatever you're feeling. What Lena was feeling was terror. She'd built her entire identity for 3 years around being a victim, being powerless, being someone who'd lost everything. And now she had to figure out who she was when she won. The public statement went out the next morning, carefully worded, legally precise, but unmistakably clear about who had created the technology and who had claimed credit for it. By noon, Lena's phone, the new encrypted one, was buzzing with notifications. News outlets picking up the story, tech blogs analyzing the implications, people from her past reaching out with congratulations and carefully worded apologies for not supporting her 3 years ago. Dr. James Chen called at 2 in the afternoon. Lena, his voice cracked on her name. I saw the news. I'm so sorry. I should have fought harder for you back then. Should have stood up to Shaw. Should have testified. Should have... James? She cut him off gently. It's okay. It's not okay. I let you down. You did what you thought you had to do to protect your career. I don't blame you for that. And she didn't, not anymore. Anger felt exhausting now that it had somewhere to go. What are you going to do? With the patents, the technology? Lena looked around the housing unit. Temporary, borrowed, not really hers. Thought about the apartment in Queens she'd abandoned, the storage unit she'd emptied, the life she'd been living that had never quite fit. I have no idea, she said honestly. But I think I'm going to figure it out. That evening, Ethan showed up at her door with takeout from a Thai place he claimed made the best pad see ew in the city. They ate sitting on her borrowed furniture, and it felt almost normal except for the part where they were celebrating the destruction of a billionaire's empire. "Jamie wants to meet you," Ethan said between bites of noodles. Lena froze. "What?" "My son. He's been asking questions about why I've been working late. I told him I was helping someone who'd been treated unfairly, and he got very invested in the concept of justice. Now he wants to meet the person I helped." Ethan's expression was carefully neutral. "You can say no. This isn't me trying to push you into something. Just thought you should know." "What did you tell him about me?" "That you're a scientist who had her work stolen, that you're very smart and very brave, that you sign language because you care about making sure everyone can communicate." He set down his food. "He's 7. He doesn't need to know about lawsuits and NDAs and billionaires behaving badly. What if he doesn't like me?" "Jamie likes everyone who answers his questions honestly and doesn't talk down to him. You'll be fine." Lena thought about meeting Ethan's son, stepping into that part of his life. It felt significant in a way she couldn't quite articulate. "Okay, when?" "This weekend? We usually do brunch on Sundays, nothing formal, just pancakes and Jamie explaining whatever scientific concept he's currently obsessed with. My mother will be there too. She's been asking about you since the restaurant." "No pressure then." Ethan's smile was slight but genuine. "Consider it fair warning. My family is small but intense. We'll understand if you'd rather not." But Lena found she wanted to meet the kid who thought justice mattered, wanted to see Ethan with his son, wanted to step into something that felt like moving forward instead of just surviving. "Sunday sounds good," she said. Friday afternoon, Victor Shaw's lawyers released their own statement. Carefully crafted corporate speak about mutual respect, collaborative efforts, and amicable resolutions. It made Lena's skin crawl, but Jennifer had warned her this would happen. "Let him have his spin," Jennifer had said. "The facts are in the public record now. Anyone who actually reads the statements will know what happened." The tech industry, it turned out, did read the statements. By Saturday, think pieces were appearing in every major publication. Analyses of how often intellectual property theft happened in academia and industry. Profiles of other researchers who'd had their work stolen. Discussions about power imbalances and who got believed when disputes arose. Lena's name was everywhere. Dr. Lena Hartwick, the brilliant researcher who'd been erased and had fought her way back. People were calling her brave, calling her a hero, using words that didn't match how she felt at all. "You're going to have to get used to this," Rebecca told her Saturday afternoon when Lena showed up at Callaway Industries trying to escape the attention. "People love a comeback story, especially one where the powerful guy gets taken down." "I don't feel like a comeback story. I feel like someone who got lucky that a billionaire decided to help." Luck is what you call it when preparation meets opportunity. You prepared by keeping every piece of evidence. The opportunity showed up in the form of Ethan Callaway. That's not luck. That's you being smart enough to recognize when to stop hiding. Rebecca handed her a coffee. "Also, you should know that we've had 17 companies reach out asking if you're available for consulting work. The head of MIT's communication lab wants to offer you a research position. And Stanford called to ask if you'd consider keynoting their technology ethics conference." Lena's head spun. "That's insane." "That's what happens when you're vindicated publicly. Everyone who ignored you before suddenly wants to be associated with your success." "What should I do?" Rebecca's expression softened. "Whatever you want. That's the point of winning. You get to choose now." Sunday morning arrived with the particular anxiety that came from meeting someone's family. Lena changed outfits 3 times before settling on jeans and a sweater that hopefully said, "Casual, but not trying too hard." The address Ethan had given her was a brownstone in the West Village, the kind of place that had probably been in his family for generations. Diane Callaway opened the door before Lena could knock, her face breaking into a warm smile. "You came," she signed. "I was hoping you would." "Thank you for having me," Lena signed back. "Please. You helped my son remember what his spine is for. That's worth 1,000 brunches." Diane pulled her inside. "Jamie's been talking about you all week. Fair warning, he's going to ask you approximately 800 questions." The brownstone's interior was beautiful but lived in. Art on the walls, books everywhere, a marble-run construction set taking up half the living room floor exactly like Ethan had described. And in the kitchen, A dark-haired boy was explaining something very seriously to his father while Ethan attempted to flip pancakes without burning them. "Lena!" Ethan looked up, and something in his expression relaxed when he saw her. "You made it. Jamie, come meet Dr. Hartwick." The boy who turned to face her had Ethan's gray eyes and his mother's smile from the photos Lena had seen. He regarded her with the kind of serious assessment that came from being very smart and very young. "You're the scientist Dad helped," Jamie said. "I am." "Did someone really steal your work?" "They did." "That's wrong. You can't take credit for things you didn't do. That's lying." Jamie's face scrunched up with righteous indignation. "Did they go to jail?" "No, but they had to give back what they stole, and everyone knows the truth now." Jamie considered this. "That's good. Truth is important. Dad says truth matters more than being comfortable." "Your dad's right. He usually is. It's annoying." But Jamie was smiling now, and Lena found herself smiling back. Brunch was chaos in the best way. Jamie asked questions about everything: how algorithms worked, whether computers could learn sign language, what Lena's favorite equation was. Diane shared stories about Ethan as a child that made him groan and Jamie laugh. And Ethan watched all of it with an expression Lena couldn't quite read, something between contentment and careful hope. After they ate, Jamie dragged Lena to the living room to show her his marble run project. "It doesn't work yet," he admitted. "The solar panel generates power, but not enough to move the marbles uphill. Dad says I need to rethink the energy conversion rate." "What if you didn't try to move the marbles uphill?" Lena crouched beside the construction. "What if you used the solar power to create a magnetic field that guides the marbles laterally instead?" Jamie's eyes went wide. "That could work. We'd need magnets in the marbles, though. Or in the track itself, arranged in a pattern that creates a moving field as the solar cells charge and discharge." "Can we build that?" Lena looked at Ethan, who was watching from the doorway with an expression that made her chest feel tight. "If your dad doesn't mind me corrupting your son with advanced physics concepts." "Please," Ethan said, "corrupt away." They spent the next hour building a prototype, while Jamie asked questions and Diane supplied tools from what appeared to be a very well-stocked workshop in the brownstone's basement. By the time they had something that almost worked, Lena had forgotten to be nervous, forgotten to feel like an outsider, forgotten everything except the pleasure of solving problems with a kid who understood the beauty of elegant solutions. "You're good with him," Ethan said later when Jamie and Diane were in the kitchen arguing about dessert. "He's easy to be good with. Smart kids usually are. They ask real questions." Sarah used to say that Jamie was easy because he was honest about what he wanted to understand. Ethan sat beside her on the couch. "He likes you. For the record, I like him too." Lena watched Jamie demonstrate something to his grandmother with elaborate hand gestures. "Your family is wonderful. They're loud and opinionated and have no boundaries, but yeah, they're pretty great." He turned to face her. "Lena, I want to talk to you about something. The job offer I mentioned, heading up Callaway's accessibility division. I'd like to make that formal. Full position, competitive salary, your own team and budget. You'd have complete creative control over the direction of the research." "Ethan, before you say no, let me finish. I'm not offering this because I feel sorry for you or because I helped with the lawsuit. I'm offering because you're brilliant and my company needs what you can build. The accessibility field is about to explode. Aging populations, increased awareness about disability rights, technology finally catching up to what's actually needed. And you understand it in a way most researchers don't. You don't just see it as a market opportunity. You see it as about human connection." Lena's hands twisted in her lap. "What if I'm not ready? What if 3 years away from the field means I can't do this anymore?" "Then you'll relearn. But I don't think that's what's actually worrying you." "What do you think is worrying me?" "I think you're scared of wanting something again, of investing in a future that could be taken away." Ethan's voice was gentle. "I get that. I was there after Sarah died. Couldn't imagine building anything because everything felt temporary and fragile, but Jamie needed me to try anyway. And eventually trying became living again." "I don't know if I can do that." "You don't have to know. You just have to be willing to try." He stood, offered his hand. "Think about it. No pressure, no deadline. Just consider the possibility that maybe you get to have a future now." Lena took his hand, let him pull her up. Through the kitchen doorway, she could see Jamie and Diane laughing about something. Jamie signing his words even though Diane was looking right at him, just because it was how they communicated. It looked like love, looked like family, looked like the kind of life Lena had stopped believing she could have. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll think about it." That night, alone in her borrowed apartment, Lena opened her laptop and started writing. Not research notes or algorithms or anything practical, just thoughts about what she'd want to build if she could build anything. About the problems she'd seen in the last 3 years of being invisible, communication barriers, accessibility gaps, the thousand small ways technology failed the people who needed it most. She wrote until her hands cramped, until the sky outside started lightening with dawn, until she'd filled 20 pages with ideas she hadn't let herself think about in 3 years. And somewhere around page 21, Lena Hartwick realized she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was ready to build something new. The pages Lena had written became a presentation. The presentation became a proposal. And 3 weeks after Victor Shaw's world started crumbling, Lena Hartwick stood in front of Callaway Industries' board of directors and pitched a vision for accessibility technology that made half of them lean forward in their chairs. "Communication isn't just about language," she said, pulling up a slide that showed interaction patterns across different disabilities. "It's about context, intention, emotional nuance. Current adaptive technology treats these as separate problems. Translation here, text-to-speech there, sign language interpretation somewhere else. But human communication doesn't work in silos." Martin Cho, the CFO, interrupted. "With respect, Dr. Hartwick, integrated systems have been tried. The processing power required to handle multiple adaptive layers simultaneously is prohibitive for consumer devices. It was prohibitive 3 years ago, but neural processing chips have advanced, edge computing is more accessible, and the algorithms I developed, the ones Victor Shaw's been selling incomplete versions of, were designed specifically to handle multimodal integration efficiently." Lena pulled up code samples, architecture diagrams, processing benchmarks. "We can build a system that adapts in real time to the user's needs. Someone who's deaf but also has motor control issues doesn't need 2 separate assistive tools. They need one that understands both contexts and adjusts accordingly." What's the development timeline? This from Patricia Reeves, head of R&D. 18 months for a working prototype, 2 years to market if we fast-track testing and certification. Lena clicked to a budget breakdown. "It's ambitious, but the market research shows growing demand, and we'd be first movers with technology nobody else can replicate." Ethan had been quiet through the entire presentation, sitting at the far end of the table. Now he spoke. "Questions for Dr. Hartwick." They came rapid fire. Technical specifications, market analysis, competitive positioning, staffing requirements. Lena answered each one, falling into the rhythm of academic defense presentations. The part of her brain that had gone dormant for 3 years suddenly firing on all cylinders again. When the questions finally stopped, Patricia was smiling. "I have to say, this is the most compelling accessibility proposal I've seen in a decade. When can you start?" "I haven't officially accepted the position yet," Lena said carefully. "Well, consider this the board's enthusiastic encouragement to accept." Patricia looked at Ethan. "We'd be fools to let her walk out of here." After the meeting, Lena found herself in Ethan's office with Rebecca and Jennifer, all of them looking at her expectantly. "So," Rebecca said, "are you going to accept or are you going to make us grovel?" "I don't know." "How good are you at groveling?" "Terrible. I have no dignity when it comes to recruiting talent." Rebecca grinned. "But seriously, Lena, that presentation was exceptional. You had Martin Cho interested and he thinks everything costs too much." Jennifer was reviewing contracts on her tablet. "The patent transfer is finalized. As of this morning, you officially own the adaptive communication technology platform, which means you could license it to Callaway, develop it independently, or shop it to their competitors." She looked up. "Though I'd recommend against that last option given that Ethan just spent 3 weeks and considerable resources helping you get it back." "I'm not shopping it to competitors." Lena sat down, suddenly exhausted. I need to make sure this is real, that I'm making this decision because it's right, Not because I'm grateful or overwhelmed or scared, Ethan supplied quietly. Yeah, that. He came around the desk, sat in the chair beside her instead of behind the power position. You want to know what I think? Do I have a choice? Not really. I think you're terrified that if you commit to this, if you let yourself want it, something will go wrong and you'll end up back where you started. Invisible, powerless, broken. His voice was gentle but firm. But Lena, you're not that person anymore. You faced down Victor Shaw. You rebuilt your reputation. You just pitched a product that's going to change the accessibility field. You did all that while carrying 3 years of trauma and self-doubt. Imagine what you'll do when you actually believe in yourself. That's not fair. What's not fair? Using logic and pep talks when I'm trying to be irrationally anxious. Ethan's smile was slight. Take the job. If it doesn't work out, if you hate it, if corporate structure makes you want to scream, you can leave. The patents are yours. Nobody can take that away again. But at least try building something instead of just surviving. Lena looked at Rebecca and Jennifer, both of them watching with expressions that suggested they'd already decided she was taking the job. Looked at the city outside the window, at the life she'd rebuilt piece by piece. Thought about Jamie asking questions about magnetic fields, about Diane signing "Everyone deserves to be seen," about the 21 pages of ideas she'd written in a single night. Okay, she said, I'll take it, but I have conditions. Name them, Ethan said immediately. I want my own team, people I choose, not people assigned to me. I want creative control over the research direction. And I want a clause in my contract that says if the company ever tries to take credit for my work or diminish my role, I can walk with the patents and all associated research. Done. What else? A coffee maker in my office. A good one, not the terrible break room kind. Rebecca laughed. I think we can manage that. The contract negotiations took another week. Jennifer made sure every clause protected Lena's interests, that her name was tied permanently to her work, that she had the autonomy she needed. By the time Lena signed the papers, it was mid-November and Manhattan had turned cold. Her first day as head of adaptive communication technology at Callaway Industries was nothing like she'd imagined. The office they'd set up for her had floor-to-ceiling windows, a standing desk she didn't know how to operate, and the promised coffee maker, some Italian thing that looked like it required an engineering degree. There were also flowers on the desk with a card that read, "Welcome back to the world." Diane Lena was still figuring out the coffee maker when Ethan appeared in her doorway. Need help with that? I have a PhD and I can't work a coffee machine. It's embarrassing. It's a Marzocco. Nobody can work those things without training. He came over, showed her the sequence of buttons. Rebecca insisted we get the best. I tried to tell her that regular coffee makers exist, but she said if we're recruiting genius-level talent, we need genius-level caffeine delivery. Rebecca has strong opinions about coffee. Rebecca has strong opinions about everything. You'll get used to it. Ethan leaned against the desk while the machine hummed to life. How are you feeling? Like an imposter. Like someone's going to realize I don't actually belong here and escort me out. Imposter syndrome is mandatory for anyone doing work that matters. If you're not scared, you're probably not pushing hard enough. He handed her the cup the machine had produced. Perfect espresso. Exactly the right temperature. You're going to be great at this. You don't know that. I absolutely know that. You're brilliant, passionate, and you care about the work beyond just the technical challenge. That's rare. His expression shifted, became more serious. Lena, I need to tell you something. Victor Shaw's company is falling apart. Her stomach dropped. What? The media coverage about the stolen patents triggered investigations from other companies he'd worked with. Turns out we weren't the only ones questioning his claims. 3 separate firms have filed lawsuits for fraud. His investors are pulling out. And the SEC started asking questions about his financial disclosures. Ethan's voice stayed level. Nexus Innovations is going to fold within the month. Lena set down her coffee cup carefully. How do you feel about that? Honestly, relieved that we dodged that merger, concerned about the employees who'll lose their jobs, and satisfied that justice actually worked for once. He met her eyes. How do you feel about it? She thought about Victor Shaw, the man who'd destroyed her life, who'd stolen her work, who'd made her sign away her identity. Thought about him watching his empire crumble the way he'd made her watch hers disappear. I feel like I should feel triumphant, Lena said slowly. Like this is the revenge I've been owed. But mostly, I just feel tired. And kind of sad that it took all this lawsuits, public exposure, multiple investigations for anyone to believe he was capable of fraud. The system failed you. It's failing everyone who trusted Shaw and got used. Yeah, Lena picked up her coffee again. But at least it's failing him now, too. The weeks that followed were a blur of hiring interviews, research proposals, and learning how to navigate corporate politics without losing her mind. Lena built her team carefully, a mix of experienced engineers and young researchers who reminded her of herself at 25, brilliant and hungry, and convinced they could change the world. Dr. James Chen was the first person she called. I'm offering you a position, she told him over the phone, senior researcher, full benefits, and the chance to work on the technology we talked about developing 6 years ago before Victor Shaw ruined everything. James was quiet for a long moment. Lena, I don't deserve that. After what I did, after what you did, which was protect your career in a system designed to destroy people who make waves, you went to MIT and became an excellent teacher. Now I'm asking if you want to help me build something that actually matters. She softened her voice. I'm not offering this because I forgive you, James. I'm offering it because you're still one of the smartest researchers I know, and this project needs smart people more than it needs people with perfect moral track records. When do I start? By December, Lena had a team of 12, a research roadmap that made her excited to wake up in the morning, and a slowly growing sense that maybe, possibly, she was allowed to have this. She still had nightmares sometimes, dreams where Victor Shaw appeared in her office to reclaim the patents, where lawyers served papers saying it had all been a mistake, where she woke up back in her Queens studio apartment serving tables. But the nightmares were getting less frequent. What was becoming more frequent were dinners with Ethan and Jamie. They'd started as casual Sunday brunches but had expanded to Wednesday pizza nights, Saturday museum trips, occasional weeknight dinners when Ethan was too tired to cook and Lena was too wired from research to want to be alone. It felt dangerously close to something Lena wasn't ready to name. You're spending a lot of time with the Callaways, Rebecca observed one afternoon when Lena mentioned she couldn't make a team dinner because she'd promised Jamie she'd help with his science fair project. Jamie needs help with electromagnetic field demonstrations. I have relevant expertise. Huh. And the fact that his father looks at you like you hung the moon has nothing to do with it? Lena's face went hot. Ethan doesn't, it's not like that. Lena, I've worked for Ethan for 7 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Not even Sarah, and he loved Sarah with everything he had. Rebecca's expression gentled. I'm not saying you have to do anything about it. I'm just saying maybe don't pretend you haven't noticed. The thing was, Lena had noticed. She'd noticed the way Ethan found excuses to stop by her office, the way his hand lingered when he passed her coffee, the way he listened when she talked about research like every word mattered, the way he'd restructured his entire company's strategic direction because she'd pitched an accessibility platform with enough passion to move mountains. She'd also noticed that she looked for him in crowds, that her day felt incomplete if they didn't talk, that Jamie's laugh had become one of her favorite sounds in the world. It terrified her. The science fair project turned into a 3-week endeavor involving copper wire, magnets, and a detailed demonstration of how electromagnetic fields could be used in assistive technology. Jamie threw himself into it with the focused intensity of someone who'd inherited his father's work ethic, and Lena found herself enjoying the collaboration more than she'd enjoyed anything in years. You're good at this, Ethan said one evening, watching Lena and Jamie argue cheerfully about coil spacing, at science fairs, at being in his life, at making him excited about learning, at... Ethan trailed off, looking like he'd said more than he meant to. At what? At being part of this family. He said it quietly, like testing how the words sounded out loud. You fit here, Lena, with Jamie, with my mother, with me, and I know that's probably too much too soon, but I'm tired of pretending I haven't noticed. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. Ethan, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know that this isn't just gratitude or professional respect or me being nice to an employee. This is me realizing that somewhere between watching you sign to my mother and listening to you explain magnetic fields to my son, I started falling for you. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with himself. And I'm doing this badly. Sarah always said I had the romantic sensibility of a quarterly earnings report. Jamie, Lena called into the living room. Can you give your dad and me a minute? Are you guys fighting? Jamie appeared in the doorway looking worried. No, but we need to have a boring adult conversation. Gross, I'll be in my room. Jamie disappeared upstairs with the relief of a 7-year-old escaping emotional complexity. Lena turned back to Ethan. I'm a mess. I'm 30 years old and I'm still figuring out who I am after 3 years of being no one. I have nightmares about lawsuits and NDAs. I panic in grocery stores sometimes because I'm still not used to being able to afford food without checking my bank balance first. And I work for you, which makes this complicated in about 17 different ways. I know all that. And you still want what exactly? What are you asking for here? Ethan stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gray flecks in his eyes, the tired lines around his mouth, the vulnerability he usually kept locked down. I'm asking if you'd be willing to try, to see if this, he gestured between them, could be something real. No pressure, no expectations, just honesty about the fact that I care about you in a way that goes beyond professional respect or friendship. What about Jamie? What if we try this and it doesn't work and I end up hurting him? Jamie already cares about you. That's not going to change whether we date or not. But I promise we'll be careful, we'll be honest, and we'll put his well-being first. Ethan's voice dropped. Lena, I spent 2 years after Sarah died convinced I'd never feel this way about anyone again. That part of my life was over, and I needed to be okay with that. But then you walked into that restaurant and signed to my mother like it was the most natural thing in the world, and something in me woke up. Lena thought about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Thought about power dynamics and complicated feelings and the mess of building a relationship while rebuilding her life. Thought about how easy it would be to lose herself again, to become dependent on someone else's validation. Then she thought about the way Ethan looked at her like she mattered, the way he'd risked a billion-dollar deal to help her fight back, the way his son asked her questions about science with absolute trust that she'd answer honestly, the way she felt less alone, less broken, less invisible when they were together. Okay, she said. Let's try. Ethan's smile was slow, genuine, and absolutely devastating. Yeah? Yeah, but we're taking this slow. No big declarations, no moving in together after 3 weeks, no... He kissed her. It wasn't dramatic or earth-shattering, just gentle and sure and exactly right. When he pulled back, Lena was smiling despite herself. That didn't feel very slow, she said. I've been wanting to do that for 6 weeks. I'm calling that restrained. 6 weeks? This has been going on for 6 weeks? Lena, I canceled a billion-dollar merger because you told me the truth about Victor Shaw. You think that was purely professional interest? She laughed, surprised by the sound. You're ridiculous. I'm aware. But I'm your ridiculous now, apparently. They told Jamie the next morning over pancakes. Diane was there too, having developed a sixth sense about when important family conversations were happening. So Dr. Lena is going to be around more, Ethan said carefully. Not just for science projects or dinners. She and I are going to try dating, which means she'll be here as my girlfriend, not just our friend. Jamie looked between them seriously. Does this mean she gets to stay for movie night? If she wants to. And she can still help with my projects? Of course. Okay, that sounds good. Jamie turned to Lena. Do you like my dad? I do. Good. He needs someone smart who'll tell him when he's being stubborn. Jamie returned to his pancakes like this was all perfectly reasonable. Can we watch the new space documentary tonight? The one about Mars? Diane was signing something rapidly at Ethan, her face bright with mischief. What's she saying? Lena asked. That it's about time, that she called this 6 weeks ago, and that she expects us to name our first child after her. Ethan signed back with a pained expression. We're not having children. I know that. She's being insufferable. Diane caught Lena's eye and signed. He's blushing. I haven't seen him blush since he was 16. The easy intimacy of it, the signing, the teasing, the casual acceptance, made Lena's chest ache. She'd forgotten what family felt like, what belonging felt like. Thank you, she signed to Diane. for seeing me that night at the restaurant, for starting all of this. Thank you for being brave enough to step forward, Diane signed back, and for making my son remember how to smile. December turned into January. Lena's research team hit their first major milestone, a working prototype that could translate between spoken language, sign language, and text in real time with contextual understanding that put existing systems to shame. The demonstration brought the entire R&D division to their feet, applauding, and Patricia Reeves immediately started talking about accelerating the production timeline. "This is going to change everything," James said after the presentation, his eyes bright with the kind of excitement Lena remembered from grad school. "Lena, this is what we talked about building 6 years ago. It's actually happening. It's happening because I have a team and resources and nobody's trying to steal it out from under me." She looked around the lab at her researchers, at the equipment, at the life she'd built. "It's happening because I got a second chance." Well, Victor Shaw's conviction came down in February. Federal fraud charges, multiple counts of intellectual property theft, perjury. The trial had been quiet, almost anticlimactic. Richard Cross had negotiated a plea deal that avoided the spectacle of a full trial but ensured real consequences. 3 years in federal prison, restitution to multiple victims, permanent ban from holding patents or serving as an officer in any publicly traded company. Lena didn't attend the sentencing, didn't need to see Victor's face as the judge read the verdict. Jennifer called with the news, and Lena accepted it quietly, feeling nothing except a distant sense of closure. "It's over," she told Ethan that night. They were at his brownstone, Jamie asleep upstairs, the city quiet outside the windows. "How does that feel?" "Smaller than I expected. I thought I'd feel vindicated or triumphant or something big. But it just feels done." She curled into his side on the couch. "Is that weird?" "No. Revenge never feels as satisfying as people think it will. Justice is better, but even justice is just the end of something bad, not the beginning of something good." He kissed the top of her head. "You've already built the good part. Shaw going to prison is just confirmation that the bad part is over." "When did you get so wise?" "When I had to explain death to a 5-year-old and realized that platitudes don't actually help anyone. Sometimes things are just complicated and hard, and you do the best you can with what you've got." Lena tilted her head back to look at him. "I love you. I don't think I've said that yet." Ethan's expression went soft. "You haven't, but I was hoping." "Well, I do. Love you, I mean. Even though you're bossy and you catastrophize and you have terrible taste in movies." "I have excellent taste in movies. You just don't appreciate classic action films. They're all explosions and one-liners." "Exactly. Perfect cinema." He kissed her properly this time, slow and deep and full of promise. "I love you too. In case that wasn't obvious from the part where I restructured my company's entire research division around your vision. I thought that was just good business sense." "It's both. I'm excellent at multitasking." March brought the formal product launch announcement. Lena stood on stage at a tech conference in San Francisco and introduced the adaptive communication platform to an audience of industry leaders, investors, and journalists. Her hands shook for the first 30 seconds. Then she looked out at the crowd and saw Ethan in the third row with Jamie and Diane, all three of them watching her with absolute confidence, and the shaking stopped. She talked about accessibility not as charity, but as innovation. About how designing for edge cases improved technology for everyone. About how communication barriers weren't just problems for people with disabilities, they were problems for humanity's ability to connect across differences. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Afterward, journalists swarmed with questions. Investors lined up with offers, and Lena Hartwick became the name associated with the future of adaptive technology. "Dr. Hartwick!" Someone from TechCrunch pushed through the crowd. "How does it feel to go from a lawsuit with Victor Shaw to launching revolutionary technology in less than a year?" Lena thought about all the ways she could answer that, thought about the safe, corporate-approved response Rebecca had prepared. Then she looked at Ethan, who nodded slightly, trusting her to say what she needed to say. "It feels like finally being seen," Lena said. "For 3 years, I was invisible. And I'm not going to pretend that was all Victor Shaw's fault. Society made me invisible long before he did. But what matters is that I stopped accepting invisibility as my only option. I fought back. And that fight led here." She gestured to the stage, the product display, the crowd. So if there's one thing I want people to take from this story, it's that you're allowed to fight for yourself. You're allowed to demand credit for your work. And you're allowed to build something new when the old world tried to erase you. The quote went viral. By the next morning, Lena's face was on the cover of 3 major tech publications. Offers poured in, speaking engagements, consulting contracts, universities wanting her to keynote their graduations. And through it all, Ethan kept her grounded, kept her focused, kept reminding her that she didn't owe her story to anyone. You get to choose what you share, he told her one evening when she was stressed about interview requests. You get to choose how public you are about any of this. The work speaks for itself. But people want to know about the lawsuit, about Victor, about all of it. Then tell them what you're comfortable telling them. Or tell them nothing. You don't owe your trauma to strangers just because they're curious. His voice was firm. Lena, you've already won. You've reclaimed your work, built something extraordinary, and changed the industry. You don't have to perform gratitude or inspiration for anyone. She kissed him for that, grateful for someone who understood that visibility could be exhausting even when it was deserved. April was Jamie's 8th birthday. He wanted a science-themed party, naturally, and Lena helped him design experiments for his friends to run, making slime with different polymers, building simple circuits, extracting DNA from strawberries. The party was loud and chaotic and perfect, and when Jamie blew out his candles, he wished that Lena would stay forever. He didn't actually say that out loud, Ethan clarified later when they were cleaning up, but he told my mother that's what he wished for. She, of course, immediately told me. That's a lot of pressure to put on a birthday wish. Jamie's 8. Everything is life or death at 8. Ethan handed her a garbage bag, but for what it's worth, I wouldn't mind if that wish came true. Lena stopped picking up paper plates. Ethan, I'm not proposing, yet. I'm just saying that this works. You, me, Jamie, my mother showing up unannounced to give relationship advice through increasingly elaborate sign language. This whole complicated, imperfect thing we've built, it works. It's only been 6 months. It's been 6 months of the best relationship I've had since Sarah died. 6 months of watching you become yourself again. 6 months of my son asking when you're coming over because he misses you. Ethan set down the bag he was holding. I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring things out. But Lena, I've done the slow, careful thing. I've done the waiting to be sure. And I'm sure. Maybe not about everything, but I'm sure about you. Lena thought about all the logical reasons to pump the brakes. Thought about trauma and timing and the importance of not rushing into things. Then she thought about how happy she was, how safe she felt, how much she wanted this exact life with this exact man and his brilliant, weird kid. I'm sure about you too, she said quietly, and that terrifies me because I'm not sure about anything else. That's okay. We'll figure out the everything else together. They did figure it out piece by piece. Lena moved into the brownstone in June, not because Ethan pushed, but because she was spending most nights there anyway, and the commute from Queens was getting ridiculous. Jamie helped her unpack, organizing her books by color in a system that made no sense but that he insisted was scientifically optimal. Now you can be here all the time, he said with satisfaction. Does that make you happy? Yeah, you make Dad less sad, and you answer my questions without getting tired of them. Your dad's not sad anymore. Jamie looked at her seriously. He was before. After Mom died, he was sad all the time, even when he smiled. But now he's different. Better. He went back to organizing books. Mom would like you. She liked people who were smart and stood up for things. Lena's throat closed. Thank you for telling me that. It's true. Dad says we always tell the truth, even when it's hard. And the truth is, you fit here. By the time summer arrived, Lena had a life she'd stopped believing was possible. A career she loved, a family that chose her, a partner who saw her completely and loved her anyway. The adaptive communication platform had launched to commercial success, her team had expanded to 20 researchers, and she'd been invited to keynote at 3 major conferences. She still had hard days. Days when the trauma from the lawsuit surfaced unexpectedly, when she panicked about something going wrong, when she couldn't quite believe this was real. But Ethan knew how to sit with her through those days without trying to fix her, and slowly, the hard days became less frequent. One evening in late August, they were sitting on the brownstone's back patio while Jamie played with some robotics kit inside. The air was warm, the sky turning purple with dusk, and Lena felt more at peace than she could remember feeling in her entire adult life. "I want to ask you something," Ethan said, "and you can absolutely say no." That's always a promising start to a conversation. He smiled, but it was nervous, uncertain in a way he rarely was. "Marry me." Lena's heart stopped. "What?" "Marry me. Not right now, not tomorrow, but someday when you're ready. I know it's soon. I know we're still figuring things out. But Lena, I don't want to figure them out with anyone else. I want to build a life with you. I want Jamie to have you as family permanently, not just as Dad's girlfriend. I want to wake up 50 years from now and still be having ridiculous arguments about whether Die Hard is a good movie. Die Hard is not a good movie. It's an excellent movie, and you're wrong. But that's not the point." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a simple ring, elegant without being ostentatious, exactly what Lena would have chosen if she'd been choosing. "The point is I love you. The point is you make everything better. The point is I want forever if you'll give it to me." Lena looked at the ring, at Ethan's face, at the life they'd built together from the ruins of their separate traumas. She thought about the waitress who'd been too scared to make eye contact with customers, about the billionaire who'd risked everything for truth, about how unlikely it was that they'd found each other at all. "Yes," she said, "not because I have it all figured out, not because I'm magically healed or perfect or sure about the future, but because I want to build that future with you anyway." Ethan's smile was brilliant, relieved, absolutely devastating. He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her like they had all the time in the world, which Lena realized they did. Inside the brownstone, Jamie looked up from his robotics project and saw his father and Lena through the window, saw them holding each other like they were the only two people in the world. He smiled, satisfied, and went back to his robots. Everything was exactly as it should be. The engagement announcement went out quietly. No press releases, no social media fanfare, just a simple family dinner where Diane cried happy tears and Jamie announced he'd known this was coming for months because Dad got weird whenever Lena left the room. "I did not get weird," Ethan protested. "You absolutely got weird," Jamie said with the brutal honesty of an 8-year-old. "You'd stare at the door like a sad puppy. It was embarrassing." "Your father has never resembled a puppy in his entire life," Diane signed, laughing. "A wolf, maybe. Something dignified and intimidating." "Wolves are just fancy puppies," Jamie pointed out, which led to a 15-minute debate about canine taxonomy that only ended when Lena reminded everyone that dinner was getting cold. Later, after Jamie had gone to bed and Diane had left with promises to start planning an engagement party that Lena hadn't agreed to, Ethan and Lena sat in the living room with the comfortable silence that came from knowing each other's rhythms. "We should probably talk about the actual wedding," Ethan said. "Timeline, guest list, whether we're doing something big or small." "Small," Lena said immediately. "I don't need 300 people watching me have feelings in public." "Thank God. I was worried you'd want something massive." He pulled her closer. "How small are we talking?" "Family, close friends, maybe 50 people total." She thought about it. "I don't have much family left. My parents died in a car accident when I was in college, and I'm an only child. There's an aunt in Oregon I barely know and a couple of cousins I haven't seen in years." "I'm sorry, I didn't realize." "It's okay. It was a long time ago." Lena traced patterns on his arm. "For a while, losing them felt like the worst thing that could happen to me. Then Victor happened, and I realized you can lose family and still survive. What nearly destroyed me was losing myself." "You didn't lose yourself. You just had to hide for a while. Same difference when you're the one doing the hiding." She looked up at him. "But I'm not hiding anymore. And I think your family is big enough for both of us anyway. Diane has more opinions than 3 normal mothers combined. That's putting it mildly. She's already planning floral arrangements in her head. I could see it in her eyes at dinner. Should I be worried? Probably. My mother once organized a charity gala for 200 people in 6 weeks because she decided the original planners weren't thinking ambitiously enough. A wedding is going to unleash organizational forces you can't possibly comprehend." Lena laughed. "I'll manage. I took down Victor Shaw. I can handle wedding planning. One of those things involved lawyers and federal fraud charges. The other involves my mother's vision for the perfect celebration and her complete inability to compromise. I know which one I'd choose. They settled on an October wedding, a year away, enough time to plan without the stress of rushing, close enough that they didn't have to wait forever. Small ceremony at the brownstone, reception in the garden. Diane took charge of flowers and catering with the efficiency of a military general. Rebecca, who'd become genuinely fond of Lena over the past year, volunteered to handle logistics and keep Diane from going completely overboard. "You're going to owe me," Rebecca told Lena during a planning meeting in September. Diane wanted ice sculptures in October. I had to talk her down to tasteful autumn centerpieces. Ice sculptures? She said they represented the impermanence of life and the beauty of transformation. I told her they represented water in solid form and would melt all over the garden. Rebecca made a note on her tablet. Also, she wants Jamie to walk you down the aisle since you don't have a father to do it. I told her to ask you first before making assumptions, but knowing Diane, she's already embroidering it on something. Lena's chest tightened. The idea of Jamie walking her down the aisle, this kid who'd accepted her into his life with such open trust, who'd helped her remember what family could feel like, was almost too much. "I think that would be perfect," she said quietly. Work continued to be both challenging and fulfilling in ways Lena had forgotten were possible. The adaptive communication platform had been in market for 8 months, and the user feedback was overwhelming. People with speech disabilities using it to communicate more naturally. Deaf individuals navigating hearing spaces with real-time translation. Elderly users with cognitive decline maintaining connections with family. Every review, every testimonial reminded Lena why the work mattered. But there were also setbacks. A competitor launched a knockoff product in July that was terrible but cheap, confusing the market. Patent trolls started circling, looking for ways to claim the technology infringed on their vaguely worded claims. And some disability advocacy groups pushed back against the platform, arguing that technology shouldn't be framed as fixing people. "They're not wrong," Lena told her team during a particularly frustrating meeting about the criticism. "We have to be careful about the messaging. This isn't about making disabled people more acceptable to abled society. It's about giving everyone tools to communicate on their own terms." James, who'd become her closest collaborator again, nodded. "We need to involve more disabled people in the development process, not just as users or testers, but as researchers and designers. They should be leading this work, not just benefiting from it." "Agreed. Let's restructure the team." Lena pulled up their org chart. "I want at least half of our researchers to be people with lived experience of the communication barriers we're trying to address. And I want advisory boards made up entirely of disability community members. No more designing for people. We design with them." The restructuring took months and wasn't always smooth. Hiring practices had to change. Accessibility in their own office had to improve dramatically. Lena had to confront her own assumptions about who belonged in research spaces and how expertise was defined. But by winter, the team looked different, more diverse, more critical, more honest about the limitations of technology and the importance of human-centered design. "This is better," Lena told Ethan one evening. "Harder, more complicated, but better. The work we're doing now actually reflects the communities we're trying to serve. You're rebuilding the entire field from the inside out." "I'm trying. I spent 3 years being powerless, and now I have power and resources, and I'm not going to waste them building the same broken systems that tried to erase me." She leaned against him. "Is that too ambitious?" "Ambition is what got you here. Don't apologize for it." November brought an unexpected complication. A journalist from a major publication contacted Lena, requesting an interview for a long-form piece about women in tech and the cost of fighting back against powerful men. The angle was compelling. She wanted to profile women who'd faced intellectual property theft, harassment, or discrimination and had won their battles. "It's a good opportunity," Rebecca said when Lena brought it to her for advice. "National exposure, thoughtful journalist, the kind of piece that could shift broader conversations about accountability in tech." But it means going very public with details you've kept mostly private. It means talking about the lawsuit, about Victor Shaw, about the 3 years you spent invisible. And once that story is out there, you don't get to take it back." Lena thought about it for days. Talked to Ethan, to Jennifer, to James. Read the journalist's previous work and was impressed by her nuance, her ability to tell complicated stories without reducing people to heroes or victims. Finally, she agreed to the interview. The journalist, Maria Torres, was sharp and empathetic in equal measure. She spent 3 days with Lena, at the office, at the brownstone, even at Aurelio where Lena hadn't been since the night she'd walked out mid-shift. "Do you still think about those years?" Maria asked over coffee. "The time between losing the lawsuit and meeting Ethan Calloway?" "Every day. Not in a traumatic flashback way anymore, but as a reminder of how fragile everything is. How quickly you can lose yourself if you're not careful." Lena wrapped her hands around her cup. "I think about the woman I was then, scared, angry, convinced she deserved what happened because she'd been stupid enough to trust the wrong person. And I wish I could go back and tell her she wasn't stupid. She was just young and idealistic and surrounded by systems designed to protect men like Victor Shaw." "Do you think those systems have changed?" "Some. More people are willing to believe women now, to question powerful men's narratives. But the fundamental structure is still the same. If you have money and connections, you can get away with almost anything until someone with more money and connections decides to stop you." "I got lucky. Ethan had the resources and the willingness to fight. Most people don't get that lucky." "Is that why you restructured your team? Why you're so focused on inclusive hiring and community-led development?" "Partly, but it's also because I finally have the power to do things differently, and I'm not going to waste that by recreating the same hierarchies that tried to destroy me." Lena met Maria's eyes directly. "Victor Shaw taught me what extraction looks like, taking people's ideas, their labor, their trust, and giving nothing back. I want to build something that's the opposite of that, something generative, collaborative, where everyone who contributes actually benefits." The article came out in February, 2 months before the wedding. It was titled "Dr. Lena Hartwick and the True Cost of Justice," and it was devastating in its honesty. Maria had interviewed not just Lena, but James, Jennifer, Rebecca, even some of Victor Shaw's other victims who'd been too scared to go public before. She'd traced the pattern of theft and intimidation, shown how the systems that were supposed to protect researchers had instead protected predators. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Tech companies started reviewing their intellectual property policies. Universities launched investigations into similar cases. 3 more of Victor Shaw's former colleagues came forward with their own stories, leading to additional civil suits even though he was already in prison. And Lena became a reluctant spokesperson for something bigger than her personal story. "I didn't ask for this," she told Ethan after declining her 15th speaking request in a week. "I know, but you started something by being honest about what happened to you. People see themselves in your story." He scrolled through the messages that had flooded her email. "Look at this one. A grad student at Stanford who was about to give up on a patent dispute after her advisor claimed her work. She read the article and decided to fight." Or this one. "A woman who's been working as a barista for 5 years after getting pushed out of biotech. She's going back to apply for research positions because you proved it's possible to rebuild. That's too much pressure." "It's not pressure. It's just the truth that your story matters to people." He pulled her close. "You don't have to be anyone's hero, Lena, but you also can't control what your honesty means to other people." March brought warmer weather and the final preparations for the wedding. Jamie had taken his role as Lena's escort very seriously, practicing walking at the right pace and making sure his suit fit properly. Diane had indeed gone overboard on flowers, but the result was beautiful rather than ostentatious. Autumn colors, native plants, arrangements that felt organic rather than forced. The guest list had settled at 48 people: Ethan's business associates, Lena's research team, the lawyers who'd helped take down Victor Shaw, friends from college Lena had lost touch with and then reconnected with over the past year. Small enough to feel intimate, big enough to celebrate properly. 2 weeks before the wedding, Lena got a letter. Federal prison stationery, Victor Shaw's name in the return address. Her hand shook as she held it. "Do you want me to read it first?" Ethan asked. They were in his study, late evening, Jamie asleep upstairs. "No, I need to do this." Lena opened the envelope carefully. The letter was short, handwritten in Victor's precise script. "Dr. Hartwick, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I understand now what I took from you. Not just the patents or the recognition, but the years of your life you spent believing you didn't matter. That was unconscionable. I told myself I deserved the credit because I had the vision, the connections, the business sense to make your research actually matter. I convinced myself that your role was supporting, that the work wouldn't have gone anywhere without me. I was wrong. The work was brilliant because you're brilliant, and I was just arrogant enough to think I could claim that brilliance as my own. I've had 3 years in prison to think about the people I hurt, the careers I destroyed, the innovations that died because I stole credit instead of fostering collaboration. There's a particular kind of hell in knowing you had the opportunity to build something meaningful and instead chose to build an empire on lies. I'm writing this not because I want your forgiveness or your pity. I'm writing because you deserve to know that you were right about all of it, and I'm sorry I made you fight so hard to prove what should have been obvious from the beginning. I hope you're building everything you dreamed of. I hope the technology is changing lives. And I hope you never think about me again. Victor Shaw. Lena read it twice, then set it down carefully. She felt nothing, no anger, no satisfaction, no vindication, just a distant acknowledgement that even predators could have moments of clarity. What do you want to do with it? Ethan asked. Nothing. It doesn't change anything. She looked at him. He's sorry. Good. He should be sorry. But his apology doesn't give me back those 3 years, doesn't undo the damage, doesn't fix anything he broke. It's just words. Do you want to respond? No, I don't need to. Victor Shaw spent years taking up space in my head rent-free. I'm not giving him any more real estate. She stood, dropped the letter in the recycling bin. He's done. We're done. And I have a wedding to focus on. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect October weather, cool, clear, leaves turning gold and red in the brownstones garden. Lena woke up in the guest room where she'd spent the night per tradition, and for a moment couldn't quite believe this was real. A knock on the door revealed Diane with coffee and a garment bag. Nervous, she signed. Terrified, Lena admitted. Good. Anyone who's not nervous on their wedding day is either lying or delusional. Diane set down the coffee and unzipped the garment bag to reveal Lena's dress. Simple, elegant, nothing like the elaborate gown Diane had initially suggested. You look at my son like he hung the moon. He looks at you like you are the moon. That's all that matters. I'm not good at this. At being vulnerable, at trusting this won't fall apart. Nobody's good at it. You just do it anyway because the alternative is being alone, and being alone is overrated. Diane's expression softened. Sarah would have liked you. She would have appreciated how you push Ethan to be better, how you don't let him hide behind work. And she would have loved how good you are with Jamie. I miss her, and I never met her. That's how you know you're good for this family. You honor what came before while building something new. Diane squeezed her hand. Now get dressed. We have a wedding to put on, and I'm not letting my organizational genius go to waste. The ceremony was small and perfect. Jamie walked Lena down the makeshift aisle in the garden with such serious concentration that several guests teared up. Ethan stood at the end, looking like he couldn't quite believe she was real, and Lena understood the feeling completely. The officiant was an old friend of Sarah's, a woman who'd known Ethan since college, and who spoke about marriage not as a fairy tale, but as a choice you made every day to keep choosing each other. Love isn't the hard part, she said. Love is easy when you find the right person. The hard part is building a life together when you're both complicated humans with trauma and baggage and bad habits. The hard part is choosing honesty when hiding would be simpler. The hard part is trusting that this person will catch you when you fall, even though you've been dropped before. Ethan's vows were simple. Lena, you walked into my life at exactly the moment I'd convinced myself I was done taking risks. You reminded me that the best things require risk, that hiding from pain also means hiding from joy. I promised to see you, to trust you, to build a life with you that honors both of our pasts while creating something entirely new. I promised to tell you when Die Hard is on TV, even though you think it's a terrible movie. And I promise to love you exactly as you are while supporting who you're becoming. Lena's vows made her voice shake. Ethan, 3 years ago I didn't think I deserved to be seen. I'd spent so long being invisible that I forgot what it felt like to matter. You saw me anyway. You saw me and you didn't look away, even when looking away would have been easier and safer and more profitable. You taught me that trust is possible again, that family isn't just what you're born into, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone help you. I promise to keep showing up. I promise to keep building things that matter. And I promise to never ever agree that Die Hard is a good movie, because some battles are worth fighting forever. The laughter that rippled through the crowd felt like family. When the officiant pronounced them married and Ethan kissed her, Lena felt something shift and settle. Not a transformation, she was still herself, still carrying the weight of what she'd survived. But now she was carrying it differently. Not alone, not invisible, not afraid. The reception was exactly what they'd wanted. Good food, better conversation, dancing that was more enthusiasm than skill. Jamie gave a toast that was mostly about how glad he was that Lena could help with his science projects now without it being weird. Diane cried through her entire speech about how her son had learned to open his heart again and how Lena had proven worthy of that trust. James pulled Lena aside during the dancing. "I'm proud of you, not just for the wedding, but for everything. For rebuilding, for refusing to stay disappeared, for creating something better than what existed before. I couldn't have done it without help. Nobody does anything worth doing without help. That's the whole point." He smiled. "The new team is incredible, by the way. We're doing work I didn't think was possible 6 months ago. And it's because you insisted on building something different." "We're building something different," Lena corrected. "This isn't just my vision anymore. It's all of ours." As the evening wound down and guests started leaving, Lena found herself in the garden with Ethan, both of them exhausted and happy and slightly overwhelmed. "We did it," she said. "We did, though technically my mother did about 70% of it." "Fair point. Diane is a force of nature." "She's already planning Jamie's high school graduation party. He's 8, but she's planning it." Ethan pulled Lena close, swayed to music only they could hear. "How are you feeling, honestly?" "Happy, scared, grateful, wondering when something's going to go wrong because this all feels too good." "Things will go wrong. We'll fight about stupid things. I'll work too much and you'll get obsessed with a research problem and forget to eat. Jamie will become a teenager and make us both want to scream. Life isn't perfect just because we got married." "Well, that's depressing wedding day wisdom." "That's realistic wedding day wisdom. But here's the thing, we'll figure it out together." That's what this is. Not a promise that everything will be easy, but a promise that we'll handle the hard parts as a team. Lena thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. Scared, broken, serving wine to people who didn't see her. Thought about how impossible it would have seemed then that she'd be here now, married to a man who saw her completely, part of a family that chose her, leading research that was changing how people communicated. "I love you," she said. "Even though you have terrible taste in action movies, and you catastrophize everything and you reorganized my entire research team without asking me first." "I asked? You were in the meeting." "You asked after you'd already decided. There's a difference." "Details." He kissed her forehead. "I love you too. Even though you're stubborn and you refuse to acknowledge cinematic excellence and you cry during commercials about dogs. One time. I cried one time during one commercial. It was about dog food. The dog wasn't even sad. The dog missed his owner." Their argument dissolved into laughter, into kissing, into the comfortable intimacy of people who knew each other's worst qualities and loved each other anyway. Inside the brownstone, Jamie watched from the window. His dad and Lena were dancing in the garden, probably arguing about something ridiculous, definitely happy. He thought about his mom sometimes, less frequently now, but still with love. He thought she would have liked Lena, would have appreciated how Lena made his dad laugh again, how she answered Jamie's questions without getting impatient, how she fit into their weird little family like she'd always been there. "You okay, sweetheart?" Diane appeared beside him, signing as she spoke. "Yeah, just thinking about Mom." "What about her?" "That she would have wanted Dad to be this happy. That it's okay to love Lena, even though it means Mom's really gone." Diane's eyes filled. "Your mother would be so proud of how wise you are. And yes, baby, it's absolutely okay to love Lena. Love doesn't replace other love. It just makes room for more." 6 months after the wedding, Lena stood in front of the United Nations and presented on the future of adaptive communication technology. Her team's work had expanded globally, reaching communities that had never had access to sophisticated assistive tools. The technology had been translated into 47 languages, adapted for dozens of different communication needs, and released with open-source components so local developers could customize it for their specific contexts. "What we've learned," Lena told the assembly, is that accessibility isn't charity, it's justice. It's recognizing that the barriers people face aren't inherent to their disabilities. They're built into our systems, our technologies, our assumptions about what normal communication looks like. When we design with that understanding, when we center the voices of people who've been marginalized, we create tools that work better for everyone. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. Afterward, a young woman approached Lena, couldn't have been older than 25, clutching a tablet with a communication app running. Dr. Hartwick? The voice came from the tablet, synthesized but emotional. I'm Maya. I have cerebral palsy, and this is the first communication system that actually understands what I'm trying to say. Not just the words, but the meaning behind them. I wanted to thank you. Lena's throat closed. I'm so glad it helps. It does more than help. It gave me my voice back. Maya typed something else, and the tablet spoke. I read about what happened to you, how your work was stolen, how you fought to get it back. You could have been bitter. You could have kept the technology proprietary, made millions, but you made it open source. You made it accessible. Why? Because I know what it feels like to be silenced, Lena said simply. And I never want to be part of silencing anyone else. The conversation stayed with her on the flight back to New York. She thought about Victor Shaw in prison, about the years she'd lost, about all the ways the story could have ended differently. Could have ended with her staying invisible, with Victor's fraud never being exposed, with Lena serving wine until she forgot she'd ever been anyone else. But it hadn't ended that way. It had ended with her voice restored, her work recognized, her life rebuilt into something richer than what had been taken. That evening, she came home to the brownstone to find Ethan helping Jamie with homework at the kitchen table, both of them arguing about whether math could be considered a language. It's a symbolic system for expressing relationships, Jamie insisted. That's not the same as language. Language requires semantics, pragmatics. Math has semantics. The symbols mean things. You two are both wrong, Lena said, dropping her bag. Math is a formal system. Language is a natural system. They're related, but distinct. Thank you, Ethan said. That doesn't mean you were right either. You were claiming math wasn't symbolic, which is obviously wrong. Jamie grinned. I like when you come home. You make Dad realize he's not always the smartest person in the room. I never claimed to be the smartest person in the room, Ethan protested. I claimed to be right about this specific thing. Which you weren't. Which I was partially correct about. Lena left them to their debate and headed upstairs to change. In their bedroom, she caught sight of her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Not because she looked different physically, though she did, a little, more settled, less hunted, but because the way she held herself had changed. Shoulders back, head up, the posture of someone who knew she belonged. Her phone buzzed. A text from James. New prototype just demonstrated 97% accuracy on cross-cultural communication adaptation. We're going to change everything. Another text, this one from Rebecca. Stanford wants you to keynote their engineering graduation. I told them you'd think about it, but knowing you, you'll say yes because you're physically incapable of turning down opportunities to inspire young women in STEM. And a third text from Maria Torres, the journalist. Just got word that 3 more tech companies have launched internal investigations based on the reporting we did. Keep fighting the good fight. Lena set the phone down and looked out the window at the city where she'd been destroyed and rebuilt, where she'd learned that survival wasn't the same as living, where she'd found family in the most unexpected places. From downstairs, she could hear Ethan and Jamie still debating, their voices overlapping in the comfortable chaos of family. She could hear Diane arriving, must have used her key, adding her opinions to the mathematical linguistics discussion. This was her life now. Not perfect, not without complications or hard days or moments when the trauma surfaced unexpectedly, but hers. Fully, completely, undeniably hers. Lena Hartwick had spent 3 years being invisible, and then she'd spent the next 3 years proving that invisible women don't stay invisible. They just wait for the right moment to step back into the light and remind the world exactly who they are. She went downstairs to join her family, to settle the math debate with actual research, to be present in this life she'd built from the ruins of the old one. And in the kitchen, while Diane signed something elaborate about mathematical proofs, and Jamie defended his homework vehemently, and Ethan tried to maintain order while clearly enjoying the chaos, Lena realized something fundamental. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She wasn't just rebuilding. She was thriving. She was loved. She was exactly where she belonged. The waitress who'd signed to a deaf woman in a Manhattan restaurant was gone. In her place stood Dr. Lena Hartwick, researcher, innovator, wife, bonus mother to a brilliant 8-year-old, daughter-in-law to a force of nature, leader of a team changing how humans communicated across every barrier that tried to divide them. She'd been erased once, but she'd come back louder, stronger, more herself than ever before. And this time, no one would make her disappear again.